Chapter 574. The lungs are breathing organs. When inhaling, it means to hide and bury deeply. When exhaling, it reveals its sharpness. We can see it as metal. It can be buried underground as a mineral. There are also times when it is sharpened and shines brilliantly. In the ancient Chinese view of the five elements, metal breathes water and water nourishes life. The oxygen in the lungs eventually melts into the blood and is carried to various parts of the body to nourish metabolism. What is blood? It's water. Isn't this the actual meaning of metal breathes water? Lu Cheng's explanation of the cultivation techniques had not only imprecise translations but also self-modifications. Since the development of martial arts, the original correspondence of the five elements had been adjusted according to modern anatomical findings and modern medical viewpoints. The useful parts had been fed back and opened up many blind spots in science and technology. This was also the source of continuous innovation and improvement of internal training techniques in the past 100 years. It was also proof that the present was better than the past. What Lu Cheng wanted to do was to blend cultivation and martial arts and walk a path that was different from the two. Naturally, he couldn't copy Gu Hui's techniques in his experiment. Other than helping George Wilton and the rest, it would be of no use to him. He combined the newest concepts of internal training with martial arts, and made improvements to the cultivation techniques. During this process, he mixed in the ideas he learned from the information explosion era. Just like when he first formed his Dan through balanced rotation, he didn't imitate the original Longhu Immortal. Instead, he made a new one using the astronomical universe as a blueprint and had a different meaning. Regarding this, he couldn't help but thank modern education and university life. This gave him a solid foundation for self-learning, broadened his horizons, and the ability to think logically. He was different from those martial artists who only received basic quality education in martial arts schools and sections. The internal training techniques he taught now had obvious personal characteristics. They could be considered as Lu's five elements. All living things seek energy, and all humans seek the light. This was the most basic biological law. Without the light and heat from a huge fireball known as the sun, even races that liked the dark would have their energy depleted and fall into absolute coldness and silence. In the human body, warm blood gushed out from the heart. It was the source of life. In the overall structure of the human body, its position was equivalent to the sun. It was fire. Fire was the beginning of civilization and the source of life. Water not only referred to the kidneys, but also included the body fluids in the entire circulatory system. The kidneys symbolized the cleansing, decontamination, and erasing side of water. The wood cleans the air, and the liver cleans the human body. Both sides work together to solidify energy, complete degradation, and store it. The spleen was usually deep, burying old age, nurturing blood, and filtering all kinds of things, like thick earth. Of course, Lu Cheng didn't have absolute confidence in the improvements he had made. He believed that there would definitely be problems. That was why he first found a group of voluntary lab rats to experiment on. Every day, he would check their bodies with his auditory skill and monitor for changes so that he could correct and adjust them in time. During the teaching, he would occasionally be frozen and burned, and he would disguise such abnormalities as the appearance of thinking. It was only when the first lesson was coming to an end that he put away the illustration of the confrontation formula and got Heroin Yen to demonstrate the training routine of the 24 blizzard strikes to George, Colleen, and the rest who had regained consciousness. What on earth are you teaching? Lu Cheng's phone had already received a message from Smith. You don't have to understand. Just do as you're told, he replied with a smile. Smith wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. That's what all the cult leaders say. If you're interested, you can go to the Chinese internet and search for cultivation. All right, don't search for immortal cultivation. It will mislead you into staying up all night. Lu Cheng kindly reminded him to prevent foreigners who didn't know the truth from getting into trouble. More than a month later, in the couple's bedroom in the Northern District of Connecticut. How's it going? Lu Cheng looked at Yen Zheka, who was sitting cross-legged beside the bed and had just finished her internal training. He watched as she slowly opened her eyes. Little Fairy has mastered the first part of the cultivation technique. Yen Zheka's beautiful and lively eyes looked up as she pondered and said, My spirit has indeed improved and become more resilient than before. However, I'm still far from being able to nourish my body. I estimate that it will take at least 5 years, or even more, to refine and nourish my spirit. Lu Qing nodded slightly and said thoughtfully, "That's normal. Currently, it's the conventional Dharma access. As for the Longhu Immortal, the core and most effective way to temper the spirit is the 9 words formula. If you can gather all of them, you might be able to start nourishing your body within a year." Yes, yes. Yen Zhaka undid her ponytail and let her beautiful hair fall like a waterfall. She bit her lip for a second and said happily, "After my spirit improved, my body seems to have changed a little. I feel that nourishing my innate body might really be effective." "What changes?" Lu Qing asked curiously. Yen Zhaka pointed to the part of her forehead covered by her slanted bangs and then pointed to her back. "I had a few pimples before and they left a mark. I thought that I would need to take care of them for a while and that they would disappear before the new year. However, they faded very quickly this month. In the past few days, they even showed signs of speeding up. Whoosh, they were gone." During the days when Lu Cheng was injured, she was worried and sad. So many emotions had accumulated in her heart that her skin, which didn't have many pimples, started to swell in different places. "Not bad. Maybe you can use this to develop the female beauty maintenance technique in the future." Lu Cheng chuckled and praised. "Then you'll be financially independent soon." Yen Zhaka smiled and said with her sweet dimples, "How about you? How's the effect of nourishing your body?" Lu Cheng had long reached the realm of all-seeing God. His spirit was abnormally strong and had surpassed the minimum requirement of nourishing the body by many times. During this period, he had been experimenting step by step. My body is inhuman. My nourishment has only improved a little. It has no effect on suppressing the freezing and burning effects. Moreover, I suspect that the after effects are rooted in the body. It's not something that can be resisted, immune or adapted to just because the body is stronger." Lu Cheng pondered for a few seconds and answered honestly. "Looks like this path won't work. The focus should be on combining the 9 words formula and the martial arts of cultivation." He spoke calmly and without any dejection or disappointment in his eyes. When Yen Zhaka heard the first part, she was still worried that she had started an unpleasant topic. However, when Lu Qing finished his answer, she couldn't help but say in a deep and gentle voice, "Cheng, I feel that you've become more mature." He had a charm that stood firm despite the vicissitudes of life. Thinking of this, Yen Zhaka waved her hand and said, "Kid, your temperament has grown again." "Hey, what kind of address is that?" Lu Cheng was amused. "This is the tone of a coach." Yen Zhaka raised her chin proudly. "That's how Coach sure is like." Lu Cheng smiled and shook his head. He examined himself and changed the topic. "However, with the nourishment of my spirit, my healing speed has increased again. Next week, I should be able to attempt force concentration and undergo restorative training." "Congratulations! Congratulations!" Yen Zhaka smiled like a flower, her radiance illuminating the room. Lu Cheng chuckled and said, "When the time comes, someone made a promise." "What did you promise?" Yen Zhaka's eyes widened innocently. She raised her voice and said, "I didn't promise anything." In the blink of an eye, it was Monday afternoon again. When Lu Cheng and Yen Zhaka stepped into the martial arts club, their vision blurred. They almost suspected that they had come to the wrong place. In front of them stood a group of people dressed strangely. However, some of them had blonde hair while others had blue eyes. The contrast between the two made them look very strange. "Crooked Taoist?" Lu Qing asked curiously. "Are you guys at a masquerade party?" He almost blurted out the word, cosplay. No, coach, I've successfully entered meditation." George, who had blonde hair and blue eyes and tattoos that extended to the back of his hand, shouted excitedly. "I think I should be a beginner Taoist. I've done a lot of research and custom-made my own outfit. I'm very proud of it. It's unique, powerful, and mysterious." He was very excited and rambled on. However, Lu Cheng understood the main point. After a month of repeated attempts by using the confrontation formula and subduing distracting thoughts, George had finally entered meditation on his own. He had taken a solid step forward. Of course, such people who relied on external forces were definitely inferior to those who practiced it on their own. Their foundation was weaker, and it would be more difficult for them to advance further in the future. However, to Lu Cheng, if there was a Dan equilibrium expert among all the students present, he would have achieved his goal. He would have solidified the foundation of the fusion of cultivation and martial arts. I've entered meditation too. I'm also a Taoist. The white girl, Colleen, was so excited that she almost kissed Lu Cheng. However, she was stopped by Yen Zheka, who knew their habits. We'll become Taoist too. Wilton and the rest saw hope and were unusually excited. A group of Taoists with white, black, or brown skin. Why does it feel like a mythical monster in human form? Lu Cheng laughed involuntarily. He was happy that his students had finally made a breakthrough. Well, cultivators mainly rely on long-range attacks and are elegant. After I combine martial arts, most of the time I'll be smashing with my basket-sized fists or kicking in the groin. This style is really strange. For the rest of the class, everyone studied very seriously. They did half the work but twice the effort. Lu Cheng talked about a few new things. When he was leaving, he received a message from Smith. Lu, that outfit is very cool. Remember to send me the address of the custom-made outfit. You want to disguise yourself as a Taoist? Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka looked at each other and smiled. After returning home, Lu Cheng found an empty space and closed his eyes to reflect on himself. Yen Zheka waited beside him, a little expectant and a little worried. Cheng is going to undergo restorative training in a while. After a few minutes, a crackling sound came from within Lu Cheng's body. It was like spring thunder before waking up from hibernation. He took a deep breath and gathered his force, qi, blood, and spirit in his lower abdomen. They condensed into a ball and rotated in a balanced manner. In the center of this vast starry sky, specks of light converged to form a crimson object that resembled the sun. It and Lu Cheng's Big Dan were interconnected. It was hard to tell which was the reflection and which was the real thing. Lu Cheng's mind was in turmoil. With a shake of his spirit, the Dan Qi suddenly exploded and dispersed. What's wrong? Yen Zheka asked with concern when she saw that her husband's expression was not right. Lu Cheng frowned slightly. Half puzzled and half happy, he answered, I saw the golden Dan. Chapter 575. Jean Dan. Yen Zheka's brows furrowed slightly, her gaze confused. Shortly after, her eyes widened as she blurted out, Longhu Immortal's Jean Dan? Yes. Lu Cheng nodded. As he recalled, he described, it seems to have really spread and merged with the origin. However, it still maintains a connection with each other and has an independent and complete structure. It seems to have expanded and blurred many times, becoming a parasitic object of the human body Big Dan. Only when I use force concentration to gather all my essence, qi, spirit, and willpower can it temporarily collapse and return to its original state. You can see it now. That's amazing. Yen Zheka sighed subconsciously. She then pondered for a moment before asking, then can you affect it now? Can you use the confrontation formula to stimulate it? If he didn't have the Jean Dan back then, Cheng's sequela would most likely be related to overexertion and the deficit of the origin. He wouldn't have suffered from the frequent attacks of freezing and burning. I wonder which condition would be easier to recover from. Confrontation formula? How can I use the confrontation formula when I'm balancing my Jean Dan? Asked Lu Cheng in amusement. However, just as he finished speaking, a thought flashed through his mind. He suddenly had an idea. He paused for a moment and said, it's not like there's really no way. My Jean Dan is different from other martial artists. I can maintain it for quite some time. As soon as he thought of it, he lowered his waist and raised his hands to form the confrontation formula. Following that, he withdrew his qi and blood, sank his spirit, and gathered his force. He gathered all his senses into a single point. Ice and fire circled around it, rotating steadily. This point was like a boundless starry sky. It was pitch black and cold, with the great sun as the star. Just like the real universe, each had its own function, maintaining a delicate balance. It slowly expanded until the end. Inside the universe, a cluster of nebulas gathered and manifested. The ice crystals were dazzling and scorching. It was the Jean Dan of the Longhu Immortal. While in the state of force concentration, Lu Cheng couldn't maintain the state of all-seeing God. His will, or rather, his consciousness, had become a part of the human body Big Dan and shrunk into the boundless starry sky. However, with the help of encountering gods in the void, he allowed his consciousness to rise to the peak of the universe. Looking down at everything from above, he controlled his qi, blood, spirit, and ice and fire force to change the layout of darkness and light. Stroke by stroke, he outlined the ancient and profound confrontation character. The appearance of the confrontation character, which purified the mind and body, connected with the prearranged hand seal and instantly evoked the mystery. Right at this moment, the golden core suddenly trembled and rippled. The stars rotated and similarly formed a confrontation word, the confrontation word that was located at the core. Buzz buzz buzz. Dazzling light turned into a brush and wrote another Dao technique. The content of the words was very familiar to Lu Cheng. It was the first part of the cultivation techniques that he had been studying recently. At the same time, the other 6 spots of the Jindan also had dazzling lights surrounding the confrontation word. They wanted to form a whole, but they were still a little short. However, Lu Cheng felt that his connection with the Jindan had strengthened a little. Feeling discomfort in his body, he didn't force it. After memorizing it for a while, he released the human body Big Dan and felt the surge of strength. He felt the long-awaited invincibility. In the blink of an eye, an icy chill surged and numbed his legs. This was already a daily occurrence for Lu Cheng. He didn't care about the stiffness. Shivering from the cold, he smiled at Yen Zheka. I can really activate it. And I even spat out the opening chapter. If not for your reminder, I wouldn't even have thought of trying it. You're welcome. This is the job of a coach. Yen Zheka raised her head delightedly. Phew. When the 9 words formula is complete and forms a whole, there will most likely be some changes. Even if it doesn't help me resolve the after effects, just the deepening of the connection will give me an opportunity to digest it. Lu Cheng moved his legs that had recovered and said, I'll try again and memorize the opening chapter completely. He rested for a while and tried again. With the help of Little Fairy, he gradually replicated the opening chapter of the Longhu Immortal's original version of the technique. It's a little different from the one I got from Gu Hui. Yen Zheka pressed her right index finger to her lower lip. She was half puzzled and half guessing. That's normal. Martial arts have been improving for so many years. Cultivators don't have to take the words of their predecessors as a reference that can never be wrong. Lu Cheng chuckled. I feel like you're insulting someone. The girl pursed her lips and smiled. Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds and said, Let's study it later and see what's different. Think about the meaning and logic of such a change. Maybe we can understand something by analogy. Yen Zheka nodded obediently. Immediately after she asked with dimples, Why not now? I have to temper my Emperor Yen force and Ice Spirit force. At the same time, I have to do some data collection to see if I can find a pattern. Lu Cheng didn't hide his thoughts. What pattern? Yen Zheka was confused. Lu Cheng paused and said, I've been recording all this time to see if there's a correlation between the frozen or burning parts and the way and position of my movements. Even if I find a solution to this after effect, it might take a year and a half to completely eliminate it. During such a long time, I can't guarantee that there won't be any accidents. Therefore, I want to do my best to recover some of my combat strength in advance. Cuckoo, think about it. If I can figure out the pattern and determine how many times the Ice Spirit force will cause the cold backlash, and how many times the Emperor Yen force will cause the burning effect, and where it will affect. Is it the hands, the feet, or half of the body? Then I can design and control it in advance to avoid triggering the hindrance of the whole body. I can use the parts affected by the sequela as external weapons and change the way I fight. This way, even if I face an opponent of the same level, I won't be insta-killed, and I won't be bullied when I'm down. Yen Zheka listened to Lu Cheng's tireless description of his after-effects and the countermeasures he planned to make without any negative emotions. He was methodical, gentle, and calm. Suddenly, she felt that her Chang had become a real man, from his body to his heart. In the face of danger and setbacks, he didn't cover his eyes with anger and didn't cover his heart with fear. He carried the responsibility and moved forward steadily like a rock. Her eyes deepened and gradually brightened. She watched as Lu Cheng set up his stance and struck out with force. Sometimes it was interrupted by the cold backlash, and sometimes it was tightened by the burning effect, but he never stopped. Beads of sweat rolled down his face. Lu Cheng had just recovered and didn't dare to practice too much. He stopped his moves and exhaled. Ice Spirit force will cause the burning effect twice, and Emperor Yen force will cause the freezing effect twice. If I use them alternately, I can last a total of 4 times. The final force will be the standard, but the effect will spread throughout the whole body. This is a normal punch and kick. I'll try it tomorrow and see how it works with the Fire Sect and Ice Sect dance stage secret arts. If I don't use force, I can't find the pattern yet. Yen Zheka pursed her lips and smiled faintly. It feels like a qualitative or quantitative experiment. Actually, it's more or less the same. Lu Cheng recovered from the burning pain of his flesh and blood. He smiled and walked into the house to wash his body. It was just 4 o'clock and the sky was bright. It was still early for dinner. The couple retreated into the bedroom and began to compare the opening chapter left by Longhu Immortal with Gu Hui's cultivation method. They discussed the principles behind every improvement. This didn't mean that the present would definitely win against the past. It was just that if there were no powerful beings at the beginning of the universe and no origin creatures that understood all the rules, then it would be normal for the present to win against the past. Yen Zheka was already a beginner in cultivation, so she was very interested in this. After she finished her research, she continued to talk to Lu Cheng about similar issues. She felt like she couldn't stop, so she didn't notice that he was gradually distracted. Until a hand circled around her waist and reached under her clothes. The girl turned her head blankly and blurted out, "We haven't had dinner yet." She knew that Cheng was in a good mood today, just like herself. She also knew that he had been holding it in for more than 3 months, both physically and emotionally. However, she expected to cooperate with him before going to bed. Who knew? This hooligan. It's still early. Just past 5. Which day do we not eat at 7? Lu Cheng kept kissing the girl's slender and beautiful neck as his right hand slowly moved up. It's broad daylight. Yen Zheka scolded with her cheeks slightly red. Lu Cheng strode out and pulled the curtains, filling the room with darkness. He then turned around and smiled. It's dark. Yen Zheka didn't know what to say. She was going to argue for a bit more, but when she saw Lu Cheng's stiff and sluggish steps, her heart softened. She bit her lips and snorted. She turned her head to the side and let her husband hug her body. She took the initiative to reach out her hand to cooperate. During dinner, Lu Cheng lowered his head to eat. From time to time, he would receive angry glares from his little fairy beside him. She was radiant and beautiful, but she would occasionally frown. Life seemed to be on the right track again. These days lasted until the couple's winter vacation. At this time, there were more and more people in Lu Cheng's cultivation preschool who had entered meditation. They had also adjusted their techniques to the point where there weren't many problems. Of course, George and the others wouldn't be able to achieve force concentration and Dan equilibrium without more than a year of practice. Before returning to Xiaofan, Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka went to the military base again. As usual, they tested the data and contributed blood. As usual, there were no research results. But I have good news for you. The military tech geek pushed his glasses up. What good news? Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka asked in unison. The military personnel took out a silver bracelet with a pendant and said, "Following Gu Hui's lead, we found the formation formula." Chapter 576. Lu Cheng was overjoyed and asked for confirmation. Formation formula? With a clue, the military's efficiency was off the charts. Yen Zheka subconsciously reached out to hold his right hand. He felt the same feeling as his little fairy. The tech geek answered with a little satisfaction. Following Gu Hui's trail, we investigated his friends, his classmates, and the people who were close to him. We found that he once made a bracelet for one of his classmates' children and cured the child's habit of falling down. It was confirmed that it was the array formula. The other party didn't know the reason. We spent a certain amount of money to rent this bracelet for 3 months. As he spoke, he handed the silver pendant to Lu Cheng. As he shook it, it revealed an orderly, ancient, and harmonious formation formula that seemed to be able to interfere with the outside world. This won't affect the child, right? Actually, a copy is enough. Lu Cheng asked with concern. Since the reappearance of the Jin Dan, as long as the 9 words formula has a little charm, I can easily master it. Child. That's just a child back then. He's older than you now and has a family. His habit of falling down was completely cured after he fully developed. Usually, he just uses this bracelet as a safety charm. The military personnel shook his head and laughed. Lu Cheng was stunned and blurted out, "Gu Hui isn't young anymore? He's been stuck at the initial stage of the Jindan for many years." The military personnel confirmed. "I see. No wonder." Lu Cheng took the bracelet that could be adjusted to its length and cast his gaze on the pendant. He engraved the formation formula in his eyes and seriously felt and studied it. A few minutes later, he made a hand gesture and withdrew his qi, blood, spirit, and force. He held the big Dan in his lower abdomen and let the sparkling and crimson nebula reappear. His consciousness was at the apex, guiding the movement of the stars and outlining a formation that he had only scratched the surface. His hand seals connected, his Jindan trembled, and the waves of water swayed wildly. Dazzling light cut through the darkness, forming ancient words that were full of charm and order. They connected with Lu Cheng's visualization, causing the formation, which was far from perfect, to change accordingly. It was close to perfection and left a mark. Feedback from the mark. 7 parts of the nebula exploded brilliantly. Silver fragments shone brilliantly and the ancient word filled the sky. With confrontation as the core, it was almost indistinguishable and became a whole. It was a pity that the moon was incomplete and the man was regretful. After balancing for a while and pondering, Lu Cheng released the Dan force and let his essence, qi, spirit, and willpower return to its original state. He exhaled a mouthful of murky air. He seemed to be explaining to Yen Zhaka, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Formation formula can be used externally and can control the environment and control it to restrain the enemy. Internally, it allows the body to be in order and improve its coordination. Unfortunately, it's still formation. The 9 words formula is not a whole. But it. We have some idea of the formation formula too. The military personnel interrupted. Really? Yen Zhika's eyes widened in surprise and joy. Previously, we were investigating items related to the 9 words formula that appeared in Europe's history in the past 1 to 200 years. Among them, the last known item was a painting with the formation formula. Originally, the direction was very vague and we might have to spend a few years to rule it out. Who knew that when we traced back to Master Gu Hui, we found some useful clues. If there are no surprises, we have a high chance of finding it before the end of the year. The military personnel answered in great detail when asked by the beautiful girl. Lu Cheng and Yen Zhaka looked at each other. Both were overjoyed. White snow covered the city and the cold wind was biting cold. In an ancient castle, the fireplace was burning warmly and brightly. Wearing a tuxedo and holding a glass of red wine, the owner sat on the sofa. Stroking his neatly trimmed beard, he smiled and asked the guest opposite him, "Are you here on behalf of the Dragon King of China?" "Yes. We would like to borrow one of your paintings." "We are willing to pay a price that will satisfy you," said a young man with inch-long black hair sincerely. When it came to such matters, they had always been polite before resorting to force. Of course, this was also because they had someone backing them. Otherwise, if they told the other party their intentions in advance, it would be much more troublesome if the negotiation failed. The brown-haired owner swirled the red wine in his glass and pondered for a moment. "I don't lack money or things. If you want to borrow it, I need help from the Dragon King." At this point he added with a smile, Don't worry. Don't worry. For the Dragon King, this is not a difficult matter." The young man opposite him clasped his hands and thought for a few seconds before standing up. "I need to ask for instructions." "Please." The owner made a gesture. The young man left the living room and returned a few minutes later. He looked at the owner and said in a deep voice, "The Dragon King has agreed. May we have a pleasant cooperation." The owner raised his glass to the distant east. It was the middle of January. Xiaofan was freezing. Yen Zhaka was about to start school and had booked a flight to Connecticut in 2 days. Lu Cheng had planned to spend the new year at home and spend time with his little fairy on the 3rd day of the new year. He couldn't let his parents spend New Year's Eve alone. However, considering that he had not recovered from his sequelae and that there would be a lot of guests during the new year, he decided to spend another 10 days with his parents before leaving for America. Just as the couple was discussing their plans for the rest of the days, whether to have lunch at Lu's house and visit Yan's house in the afternoon, or to book a private room at the hotel restaurant for a reunion, Lu Cheng's phone suddenly rang. It was from Shi Jiangwo. "Hello, master?" Lu Cheng answered the call expectantly. Geezer sure said heroically, "Brat, come to the nearest military base. Someone will pick you up. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The Dragon King has gotten the dequeuing formula." "Yes." Lu Cheng replied in surprise. Yen Zhuka had been listening attentively. Hearing this, she was excited and her eyes sparkled like stars. She didn't expect the 9 words formula to be collected so quickly. With a clue, the huge national machinery started working. It was much more powerful than individual effort. Lu Cheng took a deep breath and extended his right hand to his little fairy. "Let's go. Let's go." The girl held her husband's hand with a beautiful smile. Not mentioning the phone call, asking for leave, or the long journey, the young couple entered the deep and spacious mountain base in the military car. They saw heavily armed guards, elites with extraordinary skills, and Geezer Sher sitting in the researcher's office with his legs crossed. "Collecting the 9 words formula is really good. The effect of my body's reverse nourishment was only average at first, but now it's getting stronger by the day. Even if it can't be cured in the end, I'm sure I can live for another 10 years. If this goes on and other research results come in, maybe my old injury won't have completely relapsed by the time I die of old age," Shi Jiangwo said happily. Lu Cheng blurted out happily and excitedly, "That's good. That's good." Geezer Sher stood up slowly and picked up a painting on the table. "Remember to thank the Dragon King when you get back. TSK, he's a golden signboard now." "Yes, master." Lu Cheng took it eagerly. With a shake of his hand, he unrolled the painting. A huge dequeuing character appeared. It felt like layers and layers were stacked on top of each other. Lu Cheng turned his head and smiled at Yen Zhuka. Then he looked back and focused on comprehending the charm. He gripped the painting tightly and seemed to be very serious. In less than 5 minutes, he passed the dequeuing formula to his little fairy. He lowered his waist, got into a stance, and formed a hand seal. His chi and blood contracted and all kinds of feelings gathered. A miniature universe was formed in Lu Cheng's lower abdomen. The cold was the background of darkness, and the heat was the heavy light. The Jin Dan appeared again, just like many times before. Lu Cheng raised his consciousness, controlled his force, and changed the positions of the stars. He outlined an inaccurate, dequeuing character. Like before, the Jin Dan was immediately stimulated. The Milky Way rippled, and the bright tracks formed ancient seal scripts with deep layers. It guided the objects from the outside world and allowed the dequeuing in Lu Cheng's Big Dan to rearrange itself. It was full of charm. At this moment, the nebula spun faster, sometimes expanding and sometimes contracting. 8 bright spots lit up and connected with the dequeuing character. They danced around the confrontation character that purified the body and mind and quickly settled down. Lu Cheng felt as if the wind and clouds were vibrating in his ears. It transformed into an unchanging voice. Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Dequeuing. Forward. Attainment. Every sound was matched by a bright character. They stacked on the confrontation character from all directions, forming a 3-dimensional, mysterious seal script that had never appeared before. It allowed the crystal clear and Virokana to fuse more deeply with Lu Cheng's Big Dan. His sense of danger increased to another level, and his control of the Jin Dan underwent a fundamental change. At this moment, he felt that the Jin Dan was no longer a foreign object, but a weapon that he had honed for a long time. Phew. Next is the most important attempt at digesting the Jin Dan. Lu Cheng's mind was high, and he ignored the complete Dao technique that appeared. He carefully controlled the Jin Dan in an attempt to borrow some energy. The moment the energy moved, it hit the universe, causing the Big Dan to lose its balance and collapse. It was no longer something Lu Cheng could stop. Crack. A few cracks appeared on the concrete floor beneath his feet. How could this be? Lu Cheng was a little dumbfounded. Everything before was within his expectations, but he couldn't complete the most important and crucial step. He couldn't draw out the energy of the Jin Dan while balancing the Jin Dan. This was completely different from when he used the complete version of Lament of the Ice Queen. Back then, the Jin Dan was an independent entity on the outside. Now it was inside a part of the Big Dan. Once it was moved, it would lose balance. Lu Cheng gritted his teeth and visualized the entire 9 words formula. He silently chanted, Lin, Bing, Do, Zhe, Formation, Advance, to see if he could complete the activation and guide the transformation while the Jindan was in a dispersed state. He repeated it over and over again, but there was no response from his body. The Jindan seemed to be in a deep sleep when it wasn't in the forced concentration stage. Yen Zhaka had been looking at him expectantly and nervously. When she saw Lu Cheng open his eyes, she was about to ask, but when she saw that there was no joy on her husband's face, she bit her lip and held back her words. Her heart slowly sank. After a few months of training, Lu Cheng thought that he could now speak with relative calmness. But in the end, he realized that he could only keep a stiff face and shake his head slightly at his master and wife. He shook his head. Chapter 577. Yen Zhaka's face paled and her eyes reddened. She blurted out, "You might need to practice with the martial arts to see the results." Faint teeth marks were left on her pink lips. Maybe. Lu Cheng's voice was a little shaky. If the Jindan hadn't mutated and hadn't spread to his entire body, he could have easily digested it with the 9 words formula's complete control over it. But now, with the after effects, he couldn't sense the Jindan at all, let alone control it. When he could control it, it was in a state of contracting and rotating equilibrium. The slightest change in its interior would cause it to disintegrate immediately. He couldn't do anything at all. The complete martial arts manual that appeared because of the complete 9 words formula was the secret manual of Longhu Immortal, which included the parts that Gu Hui lacked. If he practiced from the beginning and followed the manual step by step, it was possible that he could gradually deepen the connection and control during the process. When the Jindan was formed, he could completely brand the Longhu Immortal's relic into his system and truly claim it as his own without the after effects. But the problem was that his root pulp had mutated. Force concentration had become an instinct and could no longer be reversed. Changing the path was just an illusion. His only hope was to achieve a breakthrough in the fusion of cultivation and martial arts. But for George and the others to achieve Dan equilibrium, even if they unleashed their potential and changed their bones, it would be impossible without at least a year's effort. In fact, with their talents, they might not even see hope in 3 to 5 years. It would be natural for them to waste 8 to 10 years. As for those with talent, who would choose a path that was still in its infancy and whose future was unclear? More importantly, even if the fusion of cultivation and martial arts was successful, it wasn't guaranteed to solve the aftereffects. The chances of disappointment would be higher. While thinking, Geezer Sher walked over and patted Lu Cheng's shoulder. "Why are you pulling a long face?" "I was as calm when I knew I didn't have long to live. Let's go. I'll take you to see a senior and let him take a look at you." "I'm not crying. I'm not that weak. At most, my expression is a little stiff." Lu Cheng subconsciously wanted to refute, but when he opened his mouth, he couldn't say anything. Yen Zhaka quickly caught up with him and reached out her soft and slender hand to hold his firmly. She followed behind Geezer Sher side by side. They left the base and were sent to the nearest military airport by a special car. After a few hours of trekking, they arrived at the capital where the sky was gray. After a series of twists and turns, they arrived at a quiet courtyard house. "Ahem, you guys call him Senior May later." It was rare for Geezer Sher to put away his playfulness as he instructed them seriously. "Elder May. Great Master Elder May?" Yen Zhaka asked in surprise. A hint of joy appeared in her dark and beautiful eyes. "Elder May? The taboo expert that Kuka mentioned? The only remaining taboo expert in Hua Nation?" Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat. Hope rekindled in his heart. Geezer Sher smacked his lips and nodded. "Yes." With that said, he took the lead and pushed the door open. There were no layers of security here, just like a real family in the marketplace. However, Lu Cheng noticed that it was currently January. The harsh winter was in full swing and everything was withering. However, in this courtyard house, green grass was growing and flowers were blooming. It was as if the 4 seasons were reversed. "They're all ordinary breeds that can't withstand the cold," Yen Zhaka said softly. Just as Lu Cheng was about to respond, he saw the figure sitting by the stone table in front of him. He was wearing a gray Chinese tunic suit, and his silver hair was neatly combed back. He was holding the teapot and leisurely pouring fragrant brownish-yellow liquid into 4 purple clay cups in front of him. This old man's eyebrows were so long that they almost jumped out of his face. His facial features were ordinary, as if they were everywhere. However, deep in his eyes, there seemed to be another world. It was the same courtyard house and the same layout. However, there were no flowers or grass. It was vast and lonely. Elder Mei, this is my unfilial disciple, Lu Cheng. This is the granddaughter of Shushan Studies' old man Ji. Her surname is Yen. Yen girl. Comrade Shi Jiangwo greeted them with the etiquette of a junior. Judging from his appearance, he was much more experienced than Elder Mei. There are talents in Jianghu. Take a seat, my friends. Elder Mei pointed at the stone bench opposite him. His smile was gentle and full of disdain. Thank you, Elder Mei. Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka bowed solemnly and sat down. Your hand. Elder Mei looked at Lu Cheng with a smile. Lu Cheng stretched out his left hand and supported it on the stone table. Elder Mei extended his palm and placed his index finger on Lu Cheng's pulse. He half closed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. Lu Cheng felt as if his body was being brushed by a spring breeze. It was indescribably comfortable. Even the surging burning didn't seem to be so uncomfortable. After a while, under the expectant gazes of Geezer Shi and Yen Zheka, Elder Mei opened his eyes. He gave Lu Cheng a deep look and said slowly, external forces are useless. You can only rely on yourself. Yes, Elder. Lu Cheng felt that his forced smile was so bitter. Yen Zheka's and Geezer Shi's eyes gradually dimmed. They fell into silence again. Elder Mei didn't say anything more. He picked up his teacup and took a sip, indicating that he was sending them off. Lu Cheng and the other two left the courtyard in silence. They boarded the car and let the driver drive forward aimlessly. After a while, Geezer Shi coughed twice and said, Elder Mei is not a doctor. You don't have to pay too much attention to his words. Besides, you still have hope to rely on yourself. Do you know what he said to me before? There is only one word, drag. Do you understand? Drag your life and wait for God to open his eyes. Lu Cheng took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Master, I know. I haven't given up. After that, he was silent for a short while. He turned his head to look at Yen Zheka and said calmly, even if I can't recover, I've done a good job collecting data during this period. I'm sure I can come up with my own fighting style in the future. Even if I can't enter the arena, I can still protect myself. Speaking of this, he raised the corner of his mouth and smiled. Besides, with my skills, I can open a martial arts club and make a lot of money. Maybe I can even go to the female beauty class or female fitness class. Yen Zheka nodded heavily. She reached out her right hand and held Lu Cheng's left palm. Their fingers intertwined tightly. A few days later, while Yen Zheka was busy studying in Connecticut, Lu Cheng stayed at home with nothing to do. Other than training and communication, he would often be in a daze. At around 10 a.m., he suddenly received a text message from the bank. Your savings card account ending with XXXX received 1200000 yuan at 10:25 a.m. On January 15th. Current balance is 8162,328. 65 yuan. This was the monthly salary given by Longhu Club. Since it was the end of the year, the difference of 400,000 yuan was made up for a total of 1.2 million yuan. Including the original amount, he had more than 8 million yuan. Because of the large balance, the bank had been looking for him to do all kinds of business. However, he didn't want to meet outsiders for the time being. Looking at the large number, Lu Cheng fell silent. After a dozen minutes, he sent a message to Yen Zheka. I want to terminate my contract with Longhu Club. Huh? Why? Yen Zheka sent a confused emoji. Lu Cheng's fingers paused for a moment before he typed, I feel indebted to Longhu Club. I haven't done anything for them, but they've helped me a lot. Now that I'm getting such a high salary every month, I feel guilty. I'll help them save as much as I can. I have hands and feet, and I have a lot of savings. I'm not afraid that I can't find something with a good income. When I recover in the future, I'll just sign a new contract. Accidents are unpredictable. Everyone has to bear the risk. Yen Zheka pondered for a moment before she replied, Since you feel uneasy, then do it. Okay. Lu Cheng lowered his head and looked at the Longhu Club navy blue martial arts suit he had bought years ago. His eyes lost focus for a moment. After a while, he opened his contact list, found Dragon King's number, and dialed it. After listening to the ringtone for a dozen seconds, Chen Qitao's dignified voice sounded, "Hello? Senior, I'm sorry to trouble you with the dequeuing formula. I'll always remember it and am very grateful." Lu Cheng expressed his gratitude first. "Don't mention it," Dragon King replied calmly. Lu Cheng looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window. "Senior, I'd like to terminate my contract with Longhu." "Why?" the Dragon King asked concisely. "I don't know when I'll recover. I've been taking Longhu's money for nothing. I feel guilty and burdened." Lu Cheng was afraid that Dragon King would reject him, so he had already thought of an excuse. "I want to fight for that glimmer of hope in my best condition." "You're not insulting the word martial artist." Chen Qitao gave a short comment. "Let your lawyer contact the club." Without waiting for Lu Cheng to reply, he said sternly, "Take what you took as compensation. Don't consider returning it. You can sign the contract when you recover." This wasn't a question but a confirmation. "Yes, Senior." Lu Cheng felt a little relieved. 3 days later on a Monday night, Yan Zheka was sorting out reports and chatting with Lu Cheng. Suddenly, she received a message from Li Liantong. "Ku, what's wrong with your husband? His Weibo is exploding. What's going on?" Yan Zheka was at a loss. She opened the app and scrolled through it. She found hot news related to Lu Cheng one after another. Breaking news. Insiders of the Martial Artist Association have confirmed that Longhu Club has terminated their contract with Lu Cheng. Why did Longhu terminate its contract with Lu Cheng? The fall of a heavenly son of the generation? Lu Cheng's problem is more serious than expected. Is it a serious injury that can't be healed, or he has no more potential? Rising like a meteor and falling like a meteor. Longhu Club's Foreign Affairs Department replied that it was not convenient to say more. They only revealed that it was Lu Cheng who initiated the termination, and that he didn't want to take advantage of Longhu. The news exploded and shocked the world. No one expected things to deteriorate to this extent. At this moment, Lu Cheng also received many greetings from friends and harassing calls from reporters. He found out that the news was spreading. He subconsciously opened his own forum and saw that it was in a state of panic. "What should I do? I'm panicking. Little Changya, ask your senior sister what happened to our idol." 55555. Senior sister didn't reply to me. How did this happen? How did this happen? What happened? Lu Cheng's injury is so serious? He can't even stay in the reserve team? Concern, worry, surprise, sadness, and other emotions were expressed through the text. Lu Cheng stared blankly until he received an overseas call from Yan Zheka. "Cheng, don't mind those reporters. They like to scare people and want to see the world in chaos." The girl hurriedly comforted him. Lu Cheng clenched his right fist and patted his mouth. "Cuckoo, I know. Don't worry." He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going to post on Weibo and give everyone an explanation." "No need." Yan Zheka hurriedly stopped him. To tear open his wound, show everyone the bloody scene, throw away his pride, and admit that he was weak. How cruel was that to Cheng? She thought quickly and looked up. "I'll tell Ling in private. You don't have to explain." Lu Cheng shook his head and said in a deep voice, "I can see that they really like me. At this time, I don't want to let them down. I don't want to not give them an explanation. This may be the only thing I can do for them now." Feeling that Cheng was determined, Yan Zheka fell silent. "All right then be a little more tactful." "Okay." Lu Cheng hung up the phone and opened Weibo. He lowered his eyes and typed, deleted, and typed again in the blank box. A few minutes later, everyone saw his reply. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to. Maybe I won't be back for a long time. Maybe I can only say goodbye." After clicking send, Lu Cheng leaned back on the sofa as though he had used up all his strength. He closed his eyes, cutting off the light and seeing the darkness. In Connecticut, America, Yan Zheka, who had just refreshed the new Weibo post, covered her mouth with her hand. Her beautiful eyes were sparkling and translucent. Chapter 578. Lying on the bed, Yan Xiaoling was busy switching between forums and Weibo. She didn't want to see any negative news, but she didn't want to miss any optimistic speculations either. Until she saw Lu Cheng's post. She was stunned. Her vision blurred. The more she rubbed, the more confused she became. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? Isn't he going to reach physical invulnerability? Isn't he going to get a title? After a momentary daze, Yan Xiaoling raised her phone and typed under Lu Cheng's Weibo post while crying, "We'll wait for you." Her reply wasn't fast enough. There were already words of disbelief that she wouldn't be able to say goodbye. "Don't. You'll get better. You're the heavenly son of the era. There's no obstacle you can't overcome. When we're at our best, we'll be together. When we're at our lowest, we'll be together. I'll burn incense and pray for you. We must meet again. We really must." In the Longhu Club, which was about to have its annual break, the members of the reserve team were looking at their phones with sorrowful expressions. After a long while, Tu Zheng let out a long sigh. What a pity. At this moment, Lu Cheng's phone was bombarded with all sorts of messages. Everyone had a tacit understanding not to call him. Instead, they used a gentler and more tactful method. Kai Zhongming said, "Seriously, we can consider forming a martial arts crosstalk group. All right, this is the real deal. I've made a prediction. You're not going to die yet. You'll definitely find a way to recover. Please trust a man's intuition." Lin Kei said, "I'm about to reach the inhuman stage. Don't let me catch up to you." Peng Liyun said, "What's the problem? Our Shangqing sect is a 1,000-year-old sect. Let's not talk about other things, but we have all sorts of weird things. Do you want to give it a try?" Renli said, "There's no obstacle that can't be overcome. You can consider going down to the war-torn zones to seek survival in the midst of death." And Chao Yang said, "There's always a way out. Furthermore, when the heavens are about to bestow great responsibilities on a man, they will first torment his will, tire his muscles and bones, starve his skin and skin, empty his body, and disturb his actions." Xing Chenggu said, "You're still young. Don't be so pessimistic. Take good care of yourself for a few years and you'll still have a chance to reach physical invulnerability." Jiang said, "Which hero hasn't suffered setbacks?" Qin Rui said, "You've always been one to create miracles." Tao Xiaofei said, "Brother Lu, as a high school graduate, I can't think of anything to say. I just want to say that you will definitely rise again." Amen said, "Mr. Lu, you're the most talented martial artist I've ever seen in real life. I'm sure you'll make it through." Lu Cheng closed his eyes and listened to the constant vibrations of his phone. After a long time, he finally picked it up with difficulty. He opened his eyes and browsed through it. He faced Scar directly. As for Peng Liyun's suggestion, he thought about it silently for a moment and made a reply. He did not mention the cause and effect, but he still described the existence of the Jin Dan and the essence of the problem. What if the Shangqing sect really had a solution? Lu Cheng responded to some of them together and some of them individually. Just as he was in the middle of a video call with Yan Zhaka and his emotions were settling down again, he suddenly heard the sound of hurried footsteps and the sound of a key being turned. Qi Feng and Lu Jisheng came in, panting. When they saw that his complexion was not too bad, they were slightly relieved. "Cheng, I'm fine. Take good care of yourself. Don't worry." Qi Feng blurted out to comfort her. It was only now that she understood what the abnormalities that she had not paid much attention to before meant. Lu Jisheng asked calmly, "What's going on?" Lu Cheng did not hide anymore and answered frankly. "The injury left a sequela. My body will be stiff from time to time. It won't affect my daily life, but I may not be able to fight in the ring." Seeing his parents' sorrowful expressions, he quickly smiled and said, "Dad, Mom, it's nothing. I've already saved a few million, and this won't affect my teaching of martial arts. There will be a future for me. Besides, who dares to say that I can't recover?" "That's right." Qi Feng quickly agreed. She suddenly thought of something and instinctively lowered her voice. "Does Zhaka and her family know?" "She has known for a long time and has always supported me. Her family has no other thoughts, as long as we can get along well." Lu Cheng briefly described. Lu Jisheng heaved a long sigh and said, "Good girl." As Lu Cheng's performance was normal and only a little gloomy, most of their worries were relieved. The next morning, Lu Cheng returned from training in the People's Park at Sonli Pavilion. He was sweating as he ran. Every 48 to 53 steps, he would experience a pause. When he passed by the old residential area, he suddenly heard someone mention his name in front of him. Did you hear? Old Lu's son, Cheng, is in trouble. You also know? Seems like he was injured by someone. There are some sequelae, just like epilepsy. Epilepsy? That's really bad. How will he live in the future? Sigh. Old Lu and Xiaofan are also suffering. They have endured and worked hard for half of their lives. Just when their son was about to be successful and enjoy life, something like this happened. Sigh. The chattering aunties glanced around with the corner of their eyes. Suddenly, their faces froze and their words stopped abruptly. They stuttered to the side and greeted, Cheng Cheng. Lu Cheng smiled and nodded. Hello, Auntie Zhu, Auntie Li. He simply greeted them and exchanged a few words without any change in his emotions. Then he passed by and jogged into the distance. Sometimes he would pause, and sometimes he would not hide, leaving behind sighs. To him, he could already predict what others would say behind his back and could not stop it. The only thing he was thankful for was that he bought a new house in advance and moved to an unfamiliar residential area. No one knew each other, so his father and mother could avoid most of the heartache. Because of the similar atmosphere and the constant concern between relatives, Lu Jisheng and Xiaofan were fully in favor of their son going to Connecticut for Chinese New Year. The plane took off and rushed into the blue sky. Lu Cheng looked out of the window and was lost in thought. After Chinese New Year, at the beginning of February, in the Martial Arts Club of Connecticut University, Lu Cheng paced with his hands behind his back, patrolling George and the others who were sitting cross-legged in the 5 hearts to the sky. Occasionally, he would stop and put his hand on their shoulders to listen to their movements to see if they were normal. He wanted to rely on the combination of cultivation and martial arts to solve the sequelae, but he could not find a direction and could not boldly try it himself. He could only hope that the students who were cultivating from the beginning could provide him with inspiration and find a way. He was already at a high level, so there was no way to go back. After a while, Lu Cheng nodded lightly and clapped his hands, indicating that today's meditation was over. Next would be martial arts and combat training. In this aspect, George, Colleen, and Wilton could already be considered half a coach, so he did not need to do too much. After class, he checked the students' bodies using listening again, but did not find any changes that could benefit him. I'm done with class. Yen Zheka sent a message. Lu Cheng calmed himself down and replied with a smile. I'll come and pick you up right away. George and Wilton were considered truants. They knew about Lu Cheng's situation, but were not sure. Seeing that their coach was acting normal, they did not ask further. After leaving the martial arts club, Lu Cheng walked towards the teaching building. After a few steps, he felt a chill and lost all feeling in his left leg. He froze on the spot. He pulled hard on his crotch, pulled up his leg, and limped forward with great difficulty. After 2 steps, he suddenly stopped. His face tightened, he clenched his teeth, clenched his fists, and punched the empty space beside him twice. Bam! Bam! Yen Zheka stood in the shadows of the cloister, watching this scene from afar. Her eyes were filled with sadness. After a few seconds, seeing that Lu Cheng had calmed down, she took a deep breath and smiled like a blooming flower. She quickly walked up to him. Seeing his little fairy, Lu Cheng put on a smile and gently reached out to hold her hand. Let's go, big sister will treat you to hot pot today. The girl waved her other hand. Wait until big sister makes up for her congenital deficiency. Then she will walk the path of martial arts and cultivation in Dan equilibrium for your reference. Sure, Lu Cheng replied with a smile. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of February. The weather was getting warmer. Lu Cheng tried the Shangqing sex method, but to no avail. He began to sweat on the lawn. Bam! Bam! He swung his right fist continuously. Every punch was filled with white mist and frosty frost. When he was about to throw the third punch, he used the all-seeing God realm to retract his chi and blood at the right time. He held the chill, force and spirit that had just surged up but had yet to take effect in his lower abdomen. Bam! His right arm no longer seemed to belong to him. Instead, it had turned into an ice whip. Under the shaking and pulling of his shoulder, he lashed out viciously. Although the posture was awkward, the power was not weak. Bam! Bam! Lu Cheng's left fist punched continuously. It was covered by a fiery glove that turned from red to white. Immediately after, he tried to do force concentration again. But this time, he was half a beat slower. The burning hurt his spirit and interrupted the retraction attempt. After pausing and enduring for a moment, Lu Cheng started again. He was not discouraged. 2 hours later, he finally finished. He caught the towel that Yen Zheke threw down from the window on the second floor. I think you handled it pretty well. When you're completely familiar with it and don't make any mistakes, it shouldn't be a problem for you to fight a match of the same level that won't last long. The girl was not stingy with her praise. I think so too, Lu Cheng replied with a smile. He wiped his sweat with a towel and walked into the house. After showering and changing his clothes, he lay on the bed and enjoyed his fairy's sudden massage. He casually picked up his phone and browsed the news. He saw a hot topic. Pang Liyun fought again after the Battle of the Kings. He's close to physical invulnerability. There's hope for a breakthrough within the year. Is he training in seclusion or training in the chaos of war? Lu Cheng was stunned. He opened the app, clicked into the chat box with Pang Liyun, and typed in the word, "Congratulations." After a few seconds of silence, he deleted the word and exited the app. Why didn't you send it? Yen Zheke glanced at him and asked casually. Lu Cheng smiled and said, I haven't broken through yet. It's too early to congratulate me. Okay. Yen Zheke didn't ask any more questions and changed the topic. That night, in the dead of night, the girl was sleeping soundly. She turned over in a daze and glanced to the side out of habit. This glance woke her up immediately. She saw Lu Cheng staring at the ceiling with his eyes open. She didn't know what he was thinking, but he didn't change his expression for a long time. Biting her lip, Yen Zheke didn't say anything. She pretended to be asleep and snuggled up to Lu Cheng. She gently held his arm and curled up her delicate body, pressing her face against his as if she wanted to fill his body and mind. Lu Cheng slowly closed his eyes, raised his head, and kissed his fairy on the forehead. That night, Yen Zheke took a shower and changed into her pajamas. She walked into the room with light steps. In the bedroom, Lu Cheng was looking at the darkness outside the window with his side facing the door. He was abnormally engrossed. Cheng! Yen Zheke tried calling him in a low voice. Lu Cheng turned around and looked deeply into his fairy's eyes. He smiled and said, Ku, don't you have a week of spring break in March? Why don't we go see the aurora? We talked about this a long time ago, but we haven't gone yet. In Yen Zheke's eyes, Lu Cheng seemed to have returned to his uninjured state. He was high-spirited and energetic, without any haze. She put away her doubts and worries and nodded solemnly. Okay. Chapter 579. In the middle of March, the northernmost state of the United States was still covered in thick white, and the forest was covered in silver. Lu Cheng and Yen Zheke sat on the sleigh, the wind raging in their ears. Their surroundings were clean and white, and they were running freely in the vast world. In front of them, a group of specially trained dogs were running quickly, giving off a cheerful atmosphere. When he stopped, Yen Zheke, who was wearing a cute plush hat, was dressed in white, and had a beautiful face, said with a smile in her eyes, So cute. But I like huskies more. Huskies. Lu Cheng didn't dare to compliment his little fairy's taste. He muttered, Stupid, stupid and dumb. Hearing him slander huskies, Yen Zheke couldn't help but laugh out loud with her gloves covering her mouth. What's wrong? Lu Cheng was confused. The girl's eyes turned and looked at him with a faint smile. She emphasized each word, stupid, stupid, and dumb, yeah. After that, she let out a crisp laugh again, which made Lu Cheng stunned. He opened his mouth and asked, Can you tell me what the joke is? Nothing. You're thinking too much. Yen Zheke replied with a serious expression and changed the topic. We've been here for a few days. Why haven't we seen the aurora yet? Didn't they say that if we try for 3 consecutive nights, we have a 90% chance of seeing it? She pouted and said with grievance, Are we the pitiful 10% of the children? No, we've only tried for 2 nights. Lu Cheng held his little fairy and walked with her on the way back. Although the couple had been here for almost 5 days and rented a cabin at the observation point, they didn't go there at first because of the bad weather. They waited until the weather improved before they tried again. Yeah, do you think we'll see it tonight? Yen Zheka asked for confirmation. Lu Cheng smiled and said, I signed up for a tour group. A driver will take us to the most likely place to see it. He's a local and has led many tour groups before. He's familiar with the place. And the weather forecast doesn't have bad news. When did you sign up? Yen Zheka's dark and beautiful eyes were full of adorableness. I'm someone who has made guides before. After failing to see the aurora twice in a row, I started to think of other ways. Oh right, didn't I mention this to you before? Why do you look so lost? Lu Cheng laughed and asked. I was having so much fun that I forgot. Yes, that must be it. Yen Zheka beamed like the most beautiful scenery in the boundless snow. When Lu Cheng turned his head and looked ahead, her expression gradually changed. She seemed to be worried about him and didn't dare to indulge in her emotions. At night, in the minibus, Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka found a place close to each other and chatted in low voices while waiting for the rest of the group to gather. This was a city, so there was still signal. The couple was holding their phones, which were covered in thermal clothes, and browsing interesting things from time to time. Out of habit, Yen Zheka clicked into Lu Cheng's fan forum. She was sad and melancholy to see that the forum had become deserted. Ever since Chang posted that Weibo in January, the forum had been bustling with activity for more than 10 days. Some were praying for blessings, some were cheering, some were provoking, and some were making counterattacks. There were so many kinds of posts. When it came to the Chinese New Year, everyone became busy. Without the support of passion, the forum, which lacked new content and expectations, gradually lost its popularity. The number of posters and replies decreased day by day. Some persisted for a week, some persisted for a month. Most people had more than one hobby. After a while, the attention on the forum decreased. I don't know what to post except for signing in and praying. Eternal Nightfall emoji. Yen Xiaoling lowered her head and sighed. Little Nightfall. What are you worried about? Clenching and dancing expression. Brahman said. It was just the two of us back then. Wasn't it very fulfilling? But at that time I was full of hope. Now I'm sad. Wah! Yen Xiaoling burst into tears. I'm sad too. I don't know how many times I've cried. Brahman said. Sai Chaozi, just play dumb. Entertain everyone and raise their hopes. Unparalleled Dragon King replied with a Nike mouth emoji. Yen Zheka continued to browse. Compared to yesterday, the number of new posts was less than 2/3 of the main page. She pursed her lips and silently exited the forum. She didn't share this matter with Lu Cheng. While she was fiddling with the digital camera in the various thermal devices, the last few members of the group arrived. The driver and the cameraman said a few words and started the journey. There was no aurora in one place. There were 2 places where they still couldn't see it. After changing to a few suitable places for observation, the driver stopped and said apologetically, Ladies and gentlemen, the clouds tonight are thicker than expected. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Tomorrow at the same time, we'll meet at the same place. No extra payment. This is my compensation for tonight. It takes fate to see the aurora. Someone sighed and didn't blame the driver. Lu Cheng and Yen Zheka looked at each other and smiled bitterly. After returning to the city and getting off the bus, a cold wind blew, piercing into their bones. It's really 10% now. Yen Zheka pouted. She wrapped herself up like a cute bear with a scarf around her neck and a mask covering her face. There are 2 more days. Don't worry. Lu Cheng comforted her. Just then, he remembered the weather forecast he had checked. A thought flashed through his mind. It seems to be getting better at midnight. Why don't we drive to the cabin and wait there? Yen Zheka looked up, her eyes clear. She pondered for a few seconds and said, Okay. Even if they still couldn't see it, it was still a good memory to share with Cheng. The road was slippery and the wind was howling. Yen Zheka drove carefully and finally arrived at the observation camp safely. She stayed in the cabin. Warmth filled the air. They snuggled in the chair and looked out of the window. They chatted casually and waited for the time to come. Seeing that the sky was getting darker and it was getting late, Yan Zheka stretched herself and said to Lu Cheng, "We're not waiting. We'll try again tomorrow night. You're the one who needs to train in the morning." "Okay." Lu Cheng exhaled and stood up. Just as they were about to turn their heads, they caught a glimpse of magical green from the corner of their eyes. It was burning in the sky, twisting and swaying faintly. Aurora! Lu Cheng and Yan Zheka looked at each other with joy in their eyes. Without thinking, they held hands, pushed open the door, and rushed out to a wider and more open place. They ran and stopped. After an unknown amount of time, all they could see was the vast and boundless cold sky and the brilliant aurora that didn't seem to exist in reality. It was dreamy, magnificent, magical, beautiful, swaying, burning, majestic, beautiful, swaying, burning, majestic, and vast. Lu Cheng and Yan Zheka felt that they were so insignificant in front of the majestic and fantastical scene of the natural world. They felt that their daily troubles were so insignificant. Their bodies and minds settled down and were not stained with dust. It was as if the word confrontation was written on them. "It's so beautiful," the girl exclaimed softly. Lu Cheng came back to his senses, took out his digital camera, and took a picture of this natural dreamscape. After taking a few more pictures, he took a group photo of his little fairy and the scene of the heavenly court. Then he extended his arm and engraved their heads together under the brilliant aurora. At the end, Yan Zheka sighed with satisfaction. "We're pretty lucky." As she spoke, she looked towards the campsite and blurted out in shock, "We ran that far?" Lu Cheng followed her gaze and chuckled in agreement. "Yeah, unknowingly." His eyes twinkled. He turned around, squatted down, and said with a smile, Come, I'll carry you back." "It's okay, I'm not tired." Yan Zheka shook her head in surprise. Seeing that Lu Cheng didn't change his posture, she had no choice but to climb onto him. She supported her knees and stood up. In the cold night, Lu Cheng stepped on the snow, creaking as he walked in the cold wind. After 10 steps, Yan Zheka felt the stiffness of his body and the pause of his movements. She wanted to jump down and lighten her husband's burden, but she sensed Lu Cheng's insistence. She moved her eyes and leaned closer to him, pressing her face against his shoulder. She didn't say anything, didn't mention anything, and didn't care what the future held. The journey wasn't too long, but Lu Cheng walked and stopped. After a while, they finally returned to the cabin. His back was soaked in cold sweat from various factors. Closing the door, Yan Zheka looked at the outside world and said happily, "This trip is perfect." "Yeah." Lu Cheng also sighed with emotion. At this moment, the girl turned around and stared at him with her beautiful eyes. She bit her lower lip and said, "Cheng, do you have something to tell me?" "Huh." Lu Cheng didn't know what expression to make. "Since the end of February, until the last few days of our trip, you've been like that emoji pack. You want to say something, but you don't. You want to say something, but 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 you want to say it again." Before Lu Cheng answered, she added fiercely, "If you're saying that you're not good enough for me now, then don't say it." Lu Cheng sighed and laughed at the same time. "How could it be this?" Yan Zheka was stunned and blurted out, "You really have something to tell me?" Lu Cheng looked at the dark night outside and turned back to look at his little fairy. He nodded slightly, "Yes." Chapter 580. Yan Zheka felt that the lights in the wooden hut had dimmed significantly. She pursed her lips and said, "You're not thinking of risking your life in the war-torn zones, are you?" "How is that possible? Going to the war-torn zones in my current state isn't a risk, it's a suicide mission." Lu Cheng shook his head with a faint smile. Yan Zheka was confused and perplexed. She bit her pink lips with her pearly white teeth and said, "Then what do you want to tell me?" Lu Cheng was silent for a few seconds before he said, "I want to ask your grandpa and grandma for a favor." "Huh?" Yan Zheka was confused. "What's so difficult about it? You can tell me whenever you want." Lu Cheng gave a wry smile and said slowly in a low voice, Actually, after understanding the nature of the sequela, I knew there was a way to solve this problem." Yan Zheka's dark eyes widened. She blurted out, "What is it?" Lu Cheng lowered his head and looked at his feet. He smiled and looked up again. "Do you remember how someone on Weibo guessed back then? He said that I was heavily injured because I failed to awaken my supernatural ability for the 3rd time. Well, after I awakened my supernatural ability for the second time, my master said that the balance of the Jin Dan was in a very fragile state. Although he didn't know that it was the Jin Dan, if he wanted to squeeze it and use it to strengthen himself, he would have to face the violent impact of the complete disintegration. He would have to at least have the physique of a physical invulnerability expert, and he could only try it under the supervision of a mighty one. Now that the Jin Dan has spread throughout my body and merged with my origin, its connection with my force isn't weaker, but stronger. However, it still maintains an independent and complete structure, so I can't sense it in my normal state and can't control it when I'm in the state of Jin Dan equilibrium. I think that if I squeeze my body to the limit like before, it will naturally give me feedback. After this feedback, its fragile balance will be broken and its structure will completely disintegrate. This means that I will have to bear the effects of all the sequelae for the next few decades, or maybe even more. Without the Jin Dan, there won't be any sequelae. Because it's a backlash of both ice and fire, your grandpa and grandma are more suitable than my master and the Dragon King. Their yin-yang twist should be more effective at that time. Lu Cheng looked at Yen Zheke. Looking at her sparkling and beautiful eyes, he paused for a few seconds before continuing. It's dangerous. I keep telling myself that the reason you practice martial arts is to protect Ku, protect your parents, protect your family and friends. It's not to compete with others, to gain recognition, or to satisfy your vanity. Unless you have no other choice, you can't take the initiative to take risks. You can't use your own safety as a bargaining chip. Therefore, I've been looking for a more reliable and safer approach. I've been waiting for the experiment of the mixture of cultivation and martial arts that might take more than 10 years to come out. Even if I lose my pride and show my weakness to everyone, I know that I should and must do so. But recently, I've been having trouble sleeping. I often think of the days when we fought for the national competition together. I think of the tears and smiles that we shed. I think of the scenes when we performed to our heart's content in the arena. I think of the cheers you gave me. I think of the way we discussed the competition seriously. Yen Zheke's vision blurred and she bit her lips instinctively. She didn't say anything and just listened to him quietly. Lu Cheng gave a wry smile and sighed. Ku, other than liking you, loving you, and the dream of spending a lifetime with you, other than being the fairy's husband, father and mother's son, grandpa and grandma's grandson, and master's disciple, I think I'm still Lu Cheng. Lu Cheng, who loved martial arts novels and watching arena competition since childhood, who had posters of the strong plastered all over his room, who worshipped the Dragon King, who got acquainted with you because of martial arts, who was indescribably excited for his first battle, who hated failure while enjoying victory, who always figured out his opponent's way of thinking, who wanted to go further, who wanted to see more powerful masters and more unique skills, and who dreamed of becoming a mighty one with physical invulnerability. After expressing his thoughts in an incomplete manner, he solemnly looked at his future partner. Ku, I want to give it a try. Yen Zheke subconsciously turned her head to the side and then quickly turned back. Her eyes met Lu Cheng's in a daze and didn't move away at all. Her voice was no longer clear and slightly hoarse as she said, Cheng, I remember the days when I was hesitating whether to study abroad or not. My feelings were probably the same as yours now. Cheng, I like the love of hope. In the small details, we are willing to accommodate each other and change ourselves for each other. But in the big picture, it's two independent, brilliant, and beautiful souls that become complete and better because of their love and union. It's not a case of one party compromising and becoming a puppet with no self but only love. She paused for a moment, pursed her lips and asked as usual, Well, how dangerous is this? Lu Cheng's vision blurred and he forced a smile. Actually, it's not that dangerous. With my current physical fitness, even if I'm not close to physical invulnerability, I'm not far from it. And with your grandfather and grandmother's suppression, transformation, and balance, there's not much danger to my life. Well, just in case, I'll ask my master and the Dragon King to watch over me. But after the mutation of the Jin Dan, it has spread throughout my body and is no longer limited to my dantian. The backlash may hurt my head, paralyze me, and turn me into an idiot. I've thought about it for a long time and have a solution. The danger isn't that high. Currently, the biggest possibility is that the mutation of the genes is close to collapse under the disintegration and is changing in a bad direction. If that's the case, I won't have any supernatural ability, and I won't be able to change my path and become the most ordinary Dan stage martial artist. If that's the case, I'll completely give up and honestly open a martial arts club, open a simplified beauty class for cultivators, and stop having unrealistic fantasies and seriously earn money to support my family. Even if I succeed, I'll completely lose my Jean Dan and become a martial artist with low potential in the eyes of others. Before Lu Cheng could finish, Yan Zheka interrupted him with her eyes glistening with tears. She took a deep breath and stared deeply into his eyes. I'll wait for you. Forever. How far is forever? Lu Cheng didn't think about it. At this moment, he only knew who said that men don't cry. 3 days later, after communicating with all parties, they boarded a flight back to China at night. The ticket price was much more expensive than booking in advance, but it was no longer important. What a pity that we didn't go anywhere else to see the seals. Yan Zheka looked out of the porthole, half disappointed and half sighing. Next time. Lu Cheng reached out and held his little fairy's delicate hand, solemnly promising. Okay, next time. Yan Zheka nodded heavily. She opened her fingers and held Lu Cheng's tightly. Passing through layers of clouds and across the sea, they arrived at Jiangnan. They arrived at the Ji family's old house and entered the place where Ji Zhenjiang and Dou Ning practiced martial arts. The place was enclosed by alloy walls and a similar roof. Arrangements had been made in advance. Cold and hot flowed around in a regular and orderly manner. The elegant and handsome Ji Zhenjiang and the graceful Dou Ning stood at the 2 points of the drawn Tai Chi, allowing their future grandson-in-law to stand on the dividing line. The handsome and dignified Dragon King, Chen Qitao, and Geezer Shi, who had put down the wine, surrounded Lu Cheng along the dividing line. Yan Zheka didn't enter willfully for fear of disturbing the mighty ones. She hid in the surveillance room and watched everything through the well-protected cameras on the roof. She put her palms together and pressed them against her lips. Are you ready? Ji Zhenjiang looked at his future grandson-in-law. Lu Cheng checked his state of mind and nodded solemnly. I'm ready. Are you sure you want to try this? Dou Ning interrupted and asked. I'm sure. Lu Cheng exhaled, determined. Dragon King nodded in satisfaction and said in a deep voice. Then let's begin. Lu Cheng lifted his head and looked at the camera. A smile appeared on his face. Then, he visualized and activated Emperor Yen force. At the beginning of the collapse, the backlash would be based on the force used. If he used fire, it would be ice. If he used ice, it would be fire. When he passed the first round, it would erupt at the same time. Although the total damage of ice and fire was about the same, the cold was more of a continuous corrosive effect. It wasn't as terrifying as the instant explosion of fire. It was more advantageous for Lu Cheng to suppress it when he was at his weakest and most vulnerable. Therefore, he chose to use Emperor Yen to squeeze himself dry. He shook his shoulders and swung his arms. His fist was covered in flames and he punched forward heavily. Bam! He seemed to have returned to his young self when he first entered the arena. Bam! Another heavy punch and another burst of flames. Lu Cheng seemed to see the him who persisted in his morning training. Bam! He punched the air. That was the him who listened to Ku's cheers and burned to his heart's content. Bam! 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 The crimson light kept flashing. That was the him who relied on preparation, analysis, surprise, and improvisation to create miracles step by step. He made it to the top 8 of the Warrior Sage Challenge tournament. That was the him who did his best to defeat strong opponents and won the provincial championship trophy in ecstasy. That was the him who bore the pressure of Lin Kei's heavy injuries and finally lived up to his expectations. After an unknown period of time, Lu Cheng started to pant. He endured the backlash of the burn and squeezed himself desperately. Bam! 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 The surroundings became hot. That was the him who eliminated the hidden dangers and protected Ku. That was the him who improved his parents' living conditions because of martial arts to earn money. That was the him who became mature, steady, and confident through martial arts practice. That was the him who dreamed of the peak and the future. Phew! Lu Cheng's body was empty and he kept panting. He felt his fire force dry up and vaguely connected to the source. At this moment, his vision wavered. He seemed to see the him who struggled in pain. He saw the him who went from hope to despair time and time again. He saw the reality of the sea that swallowed all his pride. It was as if someone was asking in his ears, "Are you willing? Are you willing to give up like this? Are you willing to guard the martial arts club and teach your disciples for the rest of your life? Are you willing to tell Ku and your children, if it weren't for me? Are you willing to be looked at with pity all the time? Are you willing to let Ku and our parents feel sorry for you but don't dare to say it? Are you willing to live a normal life most of the time with a smile on your face, but at some point in time, you suddenly feel sorrow in your heart and pain in your bones? Are you willing? No. Lu Cheng gave his answer with a roar. He punched forward with an unyielding fist. Bam! He clenched his fist and punched the air. Huge flames soared and lit up the entire training ground. The alloy walls shook and half of the cameras were destroyed. Something in Lu Cheng's body seemed to have broken. A terrifying and turbulent cold wave appeared clearly. His consciousness looked down at himself from above. Gritting his teeth, he endured the pain and contracted his body. You dare to climb the mountain of swords and step on the fire. For love and for me. Chapter 581. Lu Cheng retracted his qi and blood at the right time. He immediately saw the outer layer of the Jindan explode and scatter in all directions. Inside, the wind and clouds were surging and the water was churning. It had already lost its balance and was about to disintegrate. With a boom, the cold wave immediately surged and spread, sweeping wildly. Pierced by the bone-piercing cold, Lu Cheng could no longer maintain his force concentration. He watched helplessly as his Dan force collapsed and his spirit returned to its original position. He watched helplessly as his blood vessels froze from his abdomen. The rusty liquid that carried the scent of rust froze in an instant. It was scarlet and cold. Inch by inch, it reached his intestines and heart. Thump, thump, thump. Lu Cheng's heart contracted and expanded violently, releasing warm blood and bursting with a stream of fire from every part of his body. It was trying its best to fight against the coldness of the 10,000 paths. Its loud sound was like the beating of a drum, reverberating around the training ground. Fortunately, it was in the torso. If it was in the head, it would leave behind irreversible damage. Lu Cheng's solution to the Jindan spreading throughout his body and the possible impact on his brain was to use the realm of encountering gods in the void to seize the opportunity and retract his qi and blood, shifting the main battlefield to his abdomen. After the eruption of the Dan qi, the deadly cold spread rapidly to every part of Lu Cheng's body as his blood flowed. It was about to cross his neck, turn his spine and enter his head. At this moment, Lu Cheng felt a weight on his shoulder. Heat flowed in and white frost flowed out, forming a balance between the internal and external. The blood in his head was only slightly cold. Ji Zhenjiang and Dou Ning were at the two origin points of the yin-yang Tai Chi diagram, each holding a 3-foot-long sword. Stirring the magnetic field, they slowly rotated, alternating between light and dark, enveloping Lu Cheng, whose face was frighteningly pale. The coldness was extracted and the warmth was transmitted. Lu Cheng's body stabilized the situation. The flowing hot blood began to melt the frost and recover the lost ground. If the third supernatural ability awakening was only at this level, he felt that he could attempt it as long as he was at the inhuman stage before the Jindan spread. He had a high chance of success. Unfortunately, the nebula had mutated. Unfortunately, the main event was the subsequent disintegration. At this very moment, the crystalline and crimson red that had lost their independent structure did not spread out anymore. The jade star sometimes cut through the sky, and sometimes it shone brightly. The great suns were like enraged, ferocious beasts. After an extremely oppressive and heavy shake, they would erupt in an extremely terrifying manner. Lu Cheng could already imagine the sound of an explosion in his body. His internal organs were thrown out, his limbs, torso, and eyes were scattered everywhere. He was completely smashed into pieces. This was equivalent to the desperate strike of a top-notch physical invulnerability expert. Furthermore, it was aimed at his internal organs. The disintegration of the Jindan was enough to make any inhuman die without a complete corpse. It was enough to directly blow up a building. At this moment, the Dragon King made his move. He extended his right palm and grabbed at Lu Cheng's abdomen. His 5 fingers were covered with extremely heavy dark purple flames. Silently, like a hot knife through butter, he stabbed into Lu Cheng's abdomen. Wherever the flames passed, the blood vessels were charred black and the wounds were sealed shut. Not a single drop of blood flowed out. That heaviness was like a candle flame that attracted a bunch of moths. The great suns rapidly drew closer, and the light and heat they emitted were all absorbed by Chen Qitao's palm. He retracted his hand. In the center of his palm, the blazing white light was exaggerated. The violent force was so substantial that it was on the verge of exploding and razing the surrounding area to the ground. The Dragon King's expression did not change. He suddenly clenched his fist. The dark purple light immediately brightened, and the blazing white light was extinguished in an instant. At the same time, he straightened his waist and pushed his feet inward. Suddenly, an explosion occurred deep underground, shaking the ground violently. The training ground made of alloy clanged and almost collapsed. The nearest observation station collected data of a small-scale earthquake. The great suns in Lu Cheng's body had quietly disintegrated, turning into pure fire force that charred his skin and clothes. The stars had completely lost their balance and were about to expand and spread out. Geyser sure coughed. He reached out his left hand and pressed it on Lu Cheng's shoulder. His body became illusory, as if there was an endless cold darkness hidden in his body. He tore open his disciple's muscles, pinched his blood vessels, and suddenly pulled them out. With the help of Ji Jianzhong and Dou Ning suppression and conversion, the sparkling fragments of the resplendent star naturally filled the empty space and surged into his arm with a howl. With a shake of his shoulder and a fling of his arm, Geyser Shi threw the pervading cold wave behind him and coughed violently. The temperature dropped sharply. The alloy walls and replaceable floorboards were instantly covered with thick layers of ice. Lead clouds gathered in the room, and heavy snow fell. It was not like Jiangnan, but the North Pole. This strange scene did not disappear for a long time. With the help of several mighty ones with physical invulnerability, Lu Qing finally got through the most dangerous and problematic stage. It was so terrifying that it was much more exaggerated than what Geyser Shi had expected. Of course, this was mainly because he didn't know it was a Jindan at that time. Lu Cheng did not relax. Many uncontrollable hot currents and cold waves remained in the fragmented Jindan. They swept through his body, sometimes charring his blood vessels, sometimes freezing his body fluids, causing damage to his internal organs and other relatively fragile organs. The problem of internal bleeding occurred one after another. Enduring the unimaginable pain, Lu Cheng couldn't control his body at all. He felt as if he had become a glass doll, and cracks appeared in the tiniest places, connecting and intertwining little by little. Light and darkness intersected, and yin and yang changed. Ji Jianzhong and Dou Ning's foreheads were soaked with sweat as they operated their swordsmanship to help their grandson-in-law straighten out the ice and fire. They smoothed out the turbulent backfire and traction and released it slowly without causing a flood-like impact. These were already closely connected to Lu Cheng's body. They couldn't do more. Next, it all depended on whether Lu Cheng could hold on until the end. In the monitoring room, Yan Zheka seemed to have turned into a statue. Her hands pressed against her lips didn't move at all, but the bulging blue veins were completely different from before. The pain was so intense that Lu Cheng wanted to faint, but he persisted in examining his body. He bit his lips so hard that blood flowed out, sometimes turning into ice, sometimes evaporating. His fine parts were changing little by little as the ice and fire swept through. The mutation that would have taken days to complete was happening in a short period of time. The injuries to his internal organs were getting worse and worse. Lu Cheng felt as if he was about to lose control of his body. If this went on, it was very likely that his genes would collapse, and he would be better off dead. Even if it wasn't that serious, there was a high probability that his supernatural abilities would be erased due to the mutation of his root pulp. No, I have to do something. Amid the piercing pain, Lu Cheng pulled his consciousness out little by little, allowing it to climb 3 feet above his head bit by bit. For cuz, I'll wait for you. Forever. For Dad and Mom not to be sad and in pain. For my pride and dreams. Lu Cheng screamed madly in his heart. His eyes were wide open and bloodshot. In the extreme pain that exceeded his limits, he finally felt as if his consciousness had left his body and was looking down at it. All-seeing God above his head. In the chaos of his body, Lu Cheng couldn't control the fine details. However, he gritted his teeth and circulated his qi and blood in a way that balanced the rotation. The cold contained the scorching heat, and the light illuminated the darkness. The ice and fire rotated and intertwined in a delicate balance, as though they were forming a universe that corresponded to the yin-yang taiji diagram in the outside world. Under Ji Jianzhong and Dou Ning's guidance, the initial difficulty and sluggishness gradually became smoother and smoother. The sweeping was much gentler and the changes were much slower. The burden on Lu Cheng's body lessened, and he finally made it through the terrifying stage of relying on himself. Without a source, the power of the backlash grew weaker and more tamed. Lu Cheng's pain had become numb due to the lack of support. This allowed him to gradually regain control of the fine details. He wriggled his flesh and stopped his internal injuries. When the ice and fire weakened to a certain extent, Lu Cheng suddenly visualized the forwarding formula to suppress the negative feelings and return his mind to a peaceful lake. Immediately after, he opened his throat and said hoarsely, "Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Alignment. Forwarding. Attainment." Ancient words appeared one by one, forming a three-dimensional seal script. In an instant, the remaining power of the Jindan was subdued. They guided the genes and mutated the root pulp to a state close to perfection. Bam! Lu Cheng swung his arms to the side and threw out the remaining power that he couldn't digest. The crimson and crystalline waves of air swept across, causing the ground to be a mixture of charred and frozen. Balance everywhere. Balance everywhere. After doing all this, he stood in the same spot, as though he was examining or in a daze. Geezer sure secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He cleared his throat and asked, "Brat, how do you feel?" "How do you feel?" Lu Cheng woke up with a start from his dream, and realized his own weakness and the severity of his internal injuries. He bit the chawed wound on his lip and slid a step forward. He shook his arm and threw a punch to the side. His legs gave way and he almost fell. However, he still threw a punch with determination. Bam! Lu Cheng bent his back and threw another punch with difficulty. He was very weak and had no strength. However, he didn't feel so good in a long time. The backlash of freezing and burning didn't appear again. Bam! 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 Lu Cheng was like a martial artist struggling on the brink of death. His body was lower and lower, but his eyes were brighter and brighter. Yes, I don't have the Jindan. I don't have the greatest reliance in the past. Yes, due to the uniqueness of the Dan equilibrium, I couldn't use this opportunity to break through the bottleneck and become a physical invulnerability expert. However, I still have myself, a strong supernatural ability, a perfect body, and a solid martial arts foundation. However, I don't have any hidden dangers or problems. I can walk my own path steadily. Lu Cheng, who was bent over, suddenly raised his head. He shouted and threw a punch with his right fist. Bam! White frost and cold light rushed to the sky, mixed with the heavy burning white light. They fell slowly, illuminating Lu Cheng's face, which was full of joy. From today onwards, he would be free to do whatever he wanted, and free to do whatever he wanted. In the monitoring room, Yan Zhika suddenly covered her face and sobbed softly. Tears of joy gushed out. Chapter 582. Wuxia Province, Moshang City, Yambing Mountain, ancestral grounds of the Ice God sect. A strong gust of wind blew through the layers of pine trees. Flowers bloomed brilliantly from time to time. Lu Cheng sat on a chair on the balcony. His eyes reflected the beautiful scenery, but they were unfocused. He seemed to be in a daze, leisurely. After a long while, he picked up his phone, unlocked the screen, and quickly typed a few words. My internal training of root pulp is close to physical invulnerability. The realm of all-seeing God is also at this level. I'm just short of breaking through the barrier of connecting heaven and earth. Then, I'll be able to make the leap. In terms of cultivation, connecting heaven and earth is obtained naturally after the condensation of the Jindan and the fusion of essence, qi, spirit, and will. It will gradually become stronger as the Jindan matures and grows. On the path of martial arts, it's about connecting one's will and raising one's spirit. Through the normal interaction between the body and the outside world, one can find a way to influence the heaven and earth. The reflection of the surroundings in the ice mirror is a simplified feature. If I want to break through, I have to work on these two aspects at the same time. I have to sort myself out, find common points, and walk the path of physical invulnerability that belongs to Dan equilibrium. After writing this paragraph, Lu Cheng flipped through the previous notes and fell into deep thought again. After breaking the Jindan and removing the hidden dangers, Shi Jiangwo insisted that Yan Zheka take him away so as not to be an eyesore. However, considering that his root pulp wasn't stable enough and his body hadn't recovered from his injuries, it wasn't convenient for him to travel long distances. Therefore, Shi Jiangwo reluctantly brought him back and left him in the ancestral grounds with a beautiful environment and few people to recuperate. Yan Zheka accompanied him for a few days until he regained some mobility. Only then did she fly to Connecticut and return to her increasingly busy studies. Lu Cheng planned to recuperate for another week before returning to Xiaofan. He would stay at home for 10 to 20 days to accompany his parents before returning to America. He would be far away from attention and focus on his recovery. Of course, after confirming that there were no problems, he immediately called Qifeng and told her that he was almost fully recovered thanks to the advancement of technology and martial arts. As for his friends, he couldn't inform them one by one, nor could he explain in detail. He simply posted on his WeChat moments and said that his recovery was better than expected. He received countless likes and blessings. Dragon King had allowed him to re-sign with the club. However, he wished to enter Longhu Club only after he had attained physical invulnerability. He wanted to prove that he was worthy of the contract. While recuperating, Lu Cheng didn't slack off. Whenever he was free, he couldn't help but think about his future path, looking for a unique blend of cultivation and martial arts based on himself. For this reason, he changed his habit of not keeping a diary since he was young. Whenever he had new ideas and new understandings, he would pick up his phone, type them out in detail, and save them in many ways so that he could review and sort them out in the future. It was not until now that he finally understood why every sect and sect had their predecessors' notes. He also understood why the martial arts masters of the past had the habit of recording their experiences, and opinions. Not only was it convenient for the younger generation to refer to and cultivate, it was also helpful for them to organize their thoughts, preserve their ideas, and record the untraceable past. Lu Cheng often regretted it now. If he had kept a complete record of his experiences and feelings from the start of body forging to Dan Equilibrium, he would definitely be able to see something different now that he was rereading it. Perhaps he would have found the key and opened up a new path without George and the rest having to make breakthroughs. Sigh, a good memory is not as good as a lousy pen. Now that I think about it, all I can remember is balance, rotation, the universe, the starry sky, and other general concepts. As his thoughts fluctuated, Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and looked at the corridor that led to the balcony. He saw a girl in a white t-shirt, jeans, and light-colored running shoes walking over gracefully. Her eyes were misty and filled with love. It was Mo Jingting. "Young martial uncle, you seem to be having a good time." She walked over with a faint smile, pulled out a chair, and sat beside him. She picked up the teapot, flipped over the cup, and poured herself a full cup. While doing all this, she kept looking at Lu Cheng with interest and curiosity. She didn't expect to meet young martial uncle, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, when she took a break from work to come back to the mountains for a holiday. He doesn't look too good and looks sickly. It seems that the injury back then was more terrible than the rumors said. It's been more than half a year and he's still so weak. Also, Master had mentioned that the most serious and troublesome thing for young martial uncle was the sequelae. It was said that he would lose most of his combat ability. Thinking of this, Mo Jingting felt that she was no longer as restrained and cautious when facing Lu Cheng as before. They seemed to be able to talk to each other as equals again. "Aren't you busy with variety shows? Why are you here?" Lu Cheng asked with a plain smile, enjoying the mountain breeze. Just a while ago, when he was chatting with Ku, she mentioned that a variety show was very popular recently. The status of the participants had risen a level, including Mo Jingting. Mo Jingting sipped her tea and turned to look at the sea of pine trees. She replied with a sigh and a smile, "If you're tired, just go home and rest. It's quiet here and the air is good. Every time I stay here for a few days, my mood will become very good." After pausing for a few seconds, she asked casually, "Young martial uncle, are you here to rest?" "Yeah." Lu Cheng didn't hide it. Mo Jingting retracted her gaze and smiled thoughtfully. "At that time, I had just entered the music industry and felt that I was full of energy, had a loud voice, and had excellent control of my abdominal cavity and other body parts. I was considered a good singer in the KTV and didn't care about singing skills. In the end, when I entered the recording studio for the first time, I almost broke down and cried all the way back to the apartment. After that, I put down my pride and studied seriously with the instructor for half a year before I was considered a beginner. From then on, I knew that there's no obstacle that can't be overcome. It all depends on your attitude. Lu Cheng almost laughed and shook his head slowly. You don't have to comfort me in such a roundabout way. I'm fine now. I'm really fine now. Mo Jingting giggled and said, young martial uncle's mental fortitude is great. She didn't dwell on this topic and suddenly had an idea. She smiled and asked, young martial uncle, are you interested in doing business? Huh. Lu Cheng was a little unaccustomed to the sudden change in topic. Mo Jingting chuckled and said, you know that there's a big film company in the sect, right? In the past 1 or 2 years, online TV series and movies have been developing very quickly. I plan to start a business with my senior brothers and senior sisters to test the waters in this area. When the time comes, each of us will invest a sum of money and go to the sect fund to raise funds. If it develops well, the sect's film and television company will buy it. If we want to sell it, we can sell it. If we want to keep a certain amount of shares, we can keep a certain amount of shares. We're all family, so it's easy to talk to each other. No matter what happens to young martial uncle in the future, just based on his inhuman stage and the 2 mighty ones with physical invulnerability behind him, even if they don't take money, they can get a share. However, there's no need to say that out loud. This is poaching from the Ice God sect. Lu Cheng was speechless. He took a sip of tea and said, forget it. You guys do it yourselves. Don't drag me in. Really? Mo Jingting was surprised. This is a good thing for free and young martial uncle doesn't want to accept it. If I'm interested in the future, I'll look for you guys again. Lu Cheng declined tactfully. In the future, the professional cuckoo will be in charge of the family's investments. I don't need to blindly get involved and waste my energy. Wouldn't it be better to spend my time thinking about physical invulnerability? Seeing that young martial uncle's attitude was gentle but firm, Mo Jingting didn't say anything more. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she got up and left. She walked along the corridor towards her fixed residence, her heart full of doubts. That's weird. In young martial uncle's current situation, shouldn't he be looking for a way out and find ways to make money for the rest of his life? Shouldn't he hit it off with us immediately? Why isn't he moved at all? He didn't even ask about the price? Is it because the blow is too big and he's so disheartened that he doesn't want to do anything? Lu Cheng didn't care what Mo Jingting was thinking. Seeing that lunchtime was approaching and the servants were about to deliver the food, he stood up slowly and casually took a picture of the beautiful mountain scenery outside the balcony with his smartphone. He first sent it to his sleeping little fairy and then posted it separately on Weibo, WeChat Moments, and other places. He even added a poem. In April, the fragrance of the mortal world ends, and the peach blossoms in the mountain temple begin to bloom. Not long after, while he was enjoying the delicious food, he suddenly received a call from Talker. Cheng, you're F*King in Moshang? Little Ming asked in surprise. Lu Cheng asked in confusion. How did you know? Do you think I'm stupid? When you sent the picture, you turned on your GPS. Kai Zhongming said in annoyance and amusement. We're in Moshang too. Do you want to come and visit? We? This year's University Martial Arts Nationals competition is in Moshang? Lu Cheng suddenly realized. If things were going normally, he would definitely pay attention to the Songqing University Martial Arts Club's next journey. Who knew that such a thing would happen to him? His mood, energy, and other aspects were all affected. He only occasionally heard a few words from Little Ming. For example, Deng Yang broke through to the dance stage at the end of last year. He also understood the concept of withdrawing. Under the leadership of the two, Songqing University and Shannon worked together to eliminate the previous runner-up, Shan Bei, who had a gap in strength, and advanced into the nationals together. As for where the nationals would be held, he forgot to ask at that time and didn't remember to check later. Hey, it's been less than a year and you've completely forgotten about us? Hey, it's always the newcomers who laugh, but the old ones who cry? Kai Zhongming pretended to be sad and said, We're in Moshang, Yellow Crane Hotel. Do you want to come? Just say the word. Lu Cheng smiled and said, Okay, I'll make an appointment with a driver. I'll let you know when I confirm. There's no one on this mountain. I can't even get a taxi. I can only find the general affairs of the sect. TSK, Are you cultivating immortality on the mountain? Kai Zongming scolded jokingly. The next afternoon, Lu Cheng walked into the Yellow Crane Hotel with his hands in his pockets. He saw the talker, Kai Zongming, who was as elegant as ever. He was dressed casually and looked more mature than before. He was more attractive to girls than before. The only problem was that he still hadn't taken the step to the dance stage. You've been emptied? Little Ming blurted out in confusion. Didn't Cheng say that his body was recovering better than expected? This is called better than expected? Then how bad was the estimation? Lu Cheng sneered and said, Talker, are you blind? Can't you see that there's no construction without destruction? Can't you see that this is the second time I've been injured? I didn't look this bad in the photos taken by the reporters earlier. The second time you've been injured? Kai Zongming asked blankly. The price to pay for complete recovery. Lu Cheng explained concisely. Kai Zongming suddenly understood and patted Lu Cheng on the shoulder. I knew you'd live for 1,000 years. It's not that easy to leave. Lu Cheng almost staggered from the pat. He said unhappily, Take care of the patient. TSK, I have to enjoy this feeling before you recover. The feeling of sending a high-ranked dance stage expert flying with one slap. Little Ming gave him another slap. Of course, this time he didn't use any strength. While talking, he led Lu Cheng into his room. Deng Yang, He Zi, Yan Shaoling and the rest were already waiting there. Lu, Senior. Yan Shaoling was the first to speak. She stuttered and shouted, How's your recovery? I heard from Senior that it's much better than expected. Lu Cheng chuckled and answered, Yes, I'll be able to return to the arena in 3 or 4 months. Yeah. Yan Shaoling waved her arms and spun around subconsciously. I have to tell them and make them happy. She took out her phone and posted on the fan forum. I saw Senior. I saw Lu Cheng. He said that he'll be fully recovered in 3 or 4 months and can compete. The forum was boiling with excitement. The rest of the people began to talk about it excitedly. Many reporters would come over every day to take a look to see if there was any news material. After discovering the Eternal Nightfall post, they hurriedly checked the contract filing of the Martialist Association through internal channels. Then they came up with a piece of news. Lu Cheng is about to make a comeback but has nothing to do with Longhu. Does this mean that his potential has been exhausted? P.S. There are only 100 votes left to reach the top 10. Don't waste them. Expired votes are invalid. Chapter 583. In Kai Zongming's room, He Zi glanced at the excited Yan Shaoling and said with disdain, Don't worry about her. She'll be fine in a while. Lu Cheng chuckled and looked around at the crowd. At first, I thought that it would be good enough if one of you could reach the dance stage. This would mean that our martial arts club is on the right track. Who would have thought that in less than a year after I left, Deng Yang and He Zi would successively comprehend, withdraw, and successfully advance. He gave a thumbs up to show his appreciation. This made the cheerful Deng Yang shy. He scratched his head and said, You flatter me. I'm not as good as you, senior brother Lu. He was always nervous in front of his idol. Lu Cheng shook his head and laughed. He turned to Mu Jinyan, Wang Dali, and the others and said, Don't be affected by this. Although there is a probability of reaching the dance stage, this is only relative to the overall sample. A small number of people or a small group of people are not affected by this restriction. It's not that you have no hope just because Deng Yang and He Zi broke through. Look at Daxing Temple and Ice God Sect. Dare to dream. What if? Yes. After everyone responded seriously, Little Ming laughed and scolded. Cheng, why are you talking like an old leader who came back for an inspection? Are you going to say, This is the place where I fought and lived? It has a good tradition. I hope everyone can show that they can bear hardships and fight well. Talker, I think it's a pity that you don't want to be a crosstalk artist. Lu Cheng was used to teasing him. Kai Zongming had decided to go back to his hometown and take over his father's company after graduation. When the time came, he would consider liquidating the company and changing careers. Because his body was still weak, Lu Cheng didn't stay for long. He and Kai Zongming found a quiet and secluded place to drink tea and chat until the evening. La 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 la, Yan Shaoling paced back and forth in the room. her excitement written all over her face. She picked up her phone and browsed the forum. Suddenly, she saw a link from All the Good Names Are Taken by Dogs. The title came into view and flashed by. Yan Xiaoling suddenly frowned and clicked on the content. The reporter wrote, according to sources close to Lu Cheng, the former heavenly son will recover in 3 or 4 months and step into the ring again. You are the past, your whole family is the past. Yan Xiaoling cursed inwardly and continued reading. According to the feedback from the Martial Artist Association, Lu Cheng hasn't signed a professional contract with any forces, including Longhu. In other words, he's a free fighter. With the strength, realm and potential that he has shown in the past, although it will take 3 or 4 months for him to fully recover, there will definitely be no shortage of pursuers. The various forces should have waved their checkbooks and tried to recruit him. Unfortunately, we did not see that. Does this mean something? Could it be that in the eyes of the major forces, Lu Cheng is a risky investment and no longer possesses such terrifying potential? That's right. A high-ranked Dan stage fighter is definitely an honored guest of various forces. However, in the eyes of the teams participating in the top professional competitions, their value is just so-so. Do they lack in humans? Not lacking. They are only lacking future experts with the potential to break through to the physical invulnerability stage. Lu Cheng's cold reception might reflect something. After reading the report, Yan Xiaoling's mouth gradually turned into an O shape. She vaguely guessed that the source of the reporter's information was her post. However, she never thought that a simple sentence of hers could generate so many things. It's a waste of talent if you don't write novels. Puffing up her cheeks, Yan Xiaoling quickly scrolled through the comments and reposts. A serious injury that took an entire year to recover. How can it be possible without leaving behind some problems and losing some of his potential? How depressing. It's so depressing to think that a heavenly son of the era who braved the wind and waves has become an old inhuman who failed time and time again. This tells us that life is full of surprises and that we should enjoy ourselves while we can. To the girl above, do you want to meet me? Seriously. Does Lu Cheng need your sympathy? He is an inhuman mighty one. Even if he can't break through to the physical invulnerability stage, his future life will definitely be better than yours by 100 or 1,000 times. To be honest, if Lu Cheng isn't so focused on the top professional competitions, he can choose any second-tier team he wants. Poison Milk Hierarch, what do you think? The profile picture of Poison Milk Hierarch was a shiny round head. He reposted twice in a row. What can I think? I haven't seen Lu Cheng and I haven't gotten any reliable information. What can I think? Do I look like the kind of person who would make wild guesses without any evidence? However, I think of the past. There aren't many cases of martial arts geniuses breaking their wings halfway through, but it's definitely not rare either. Most of them can only muddle along in lower-tier competitions and slowly fade into the crowd. Phew, I'm a little relieved to hear that. Yan Xiaoling swiped with her thumb and read more comments. Lu Cheng is pretty popular. Many of my friends like him. Even if he were to fight in second-tier professional competitions, I think he would still be able to make the headlines frequently and not fade into the crowd. Previous poster, you're wrong. There are only 2 kinds of martial arts fans like. One is a famous physical invulnerability mighty one, and the other is a genius with extraordinary potential who can break through to the physical invulnerability stage in the future. If Lu Cheng were to remain at the inhuman stage for a decade or so, how many people would continue to like him? Every year, there are new, talented, and even good-looking little fresh meat. Who would waste their energy on a has-been heavenly son? Let's not talk about a decade later. Just look at how quiet Lu Cheng's fan forum is now after that Weibo post. How many people are still following him? A martial artist with no hope is like an ice cream dropped on the ground. Who would bend down and lick it? Sigh, you're right. This world is just that cruel. Of course not. Yan Xiaoling muttered silently and switched back to the forum. Howling into the sky expression. That despicable reporter. What's his name? I'll remember you. I must do something. She felt that her little chest was about to explode. In the past, she had seen news that slandered or made up stories about Lu Cheng. Although she was very angry, it was never as bad as this, because the source of the news was her post. Little Changya, calm down. Calm down. Here, there's a kitchen knife. Brahmin didn't understand the situation at first, but she didn't mind watching the show. Little Chung Ye, Nye Chi-Chi said thoughtfully, you're in Mo's hang, right? I'm here too. Why don't we meet up and discuss what to do? Ah, I'm going to kill that reporter. Yen Xiaoling was still in her own world. Sister Chi-Chi, do you want to meet up? Count me in. Count me in. I'm very close. I'm in my first year of high school. I can apply to watch the nationals. Brahmin chimed in excitedly. What are you talking about? Yen Xiaoling was at a loss. After scrolling up and down, she said, Me too. Then let's ask the others. Lu Cheng is about to enter the arena again. We have to do something. Nye Chi-Chi said with uncertainty. Roar. Yen Xiaoling immediately at D. Unparalleled Dragon King, Wonton Seller, Naive Innocence, and the others. Brahmin went to a few groups that had become quiet and asked repeatedly, Lu Cheng is coming back. Lu Cheng is coming back soon. Is there anyone who wants to discuss what to do in the forum? If not, I'll ask again later. For a moment, they who were still active were full of enthusiasm and rejuvenated 100 times. Back at the halfway point of Yanbing Mountain, Lu Cheng also saw the news. He even received a lot of detailed messages asking about his recent situation. All of them replied with, better than expected, recovering. Shaking his head, he exited the news. After half a year of torment, he was already able to face such groundless descriptions with a better attitude. Except for the first sentence, the whole news was filled with imagination and, I think. Even if he retorted, he wouldn't know where to start. If he was really full of flaws, then there would be no flaws. Moreover, the question of whether or not one had potential was not something that could be said with words. Arguing with a reporter in his field of expertise could turn white into black. At present, the only and best way to fight back was to find a way to make the great leap and become a mighty one with physical invulnerability. At that time, it would be the most powerful slap in the face. I'll work hard for my little fairy and for myself. Lu Cheng put down his phone complacently. At this moment, he received a message from Kai Zhongming. Talker asked, Are you coming to watch our match the day after tomorrow? Of course, I've already got a guest ticket, replied Lu Cheng with a smile. In the hotel, Yen Xiaoling and the rest cheered excitedly behind and beside Kai Zhongming. 2 days later, at 7:30 p.m., Xiling Martial Arts Stadium. Lu Cheng entered through the guest entrance and walked along the passageway to find his seat. He didn't wear black-rimmed glasses or disguise himself. He appeared in front of everyone in his original appearance. This was the first time he appeared in public since his injury in August last year. He felt that he couldn't hide the fact that he had gotten a guest ticket from the reporters. Disguising himself would also be useless, and it would also expose his usual outfit. His face was pale and his footsteps were a little shaky. Along the way, Lu Cheng received many looks of sympathy, pity, lamentation, and regret. He also received many looks of schadenfreude and those who didn't mind watching a show. After climbing mountains and wading through rivers, he finally sat down. He didn't care about the others and cast his gaze on the arena and the big screen. He watched the replays of yesterday's match, the introductions of today's team, and the advertisements. At 7:40 p.m., Lu Cheng saw from the corner of his eyes that 2 people who looked like reporters were trying to approach. When he was about to order the security personnel to separate them, he suddenly saw the image on the big screen change and he appeared. That was the young and inexperienced version of himself when he stepped onto the arena. That was at the beginning of the Little Martial Sage Challenge tournament. Ha! What's going on? Lu Cheng stared blankly at the screen, only to see the images constantly changing. It showed him fighting against Invincible Punch, being defeated by Iron Palm, winning against the former professional 9th Pin, Road to the Arena, and defeating Yi Yaoting with a terrifying outburst. Some were photos, some were clips, and all of them replayed the beginning of his martial arts. Next, Lu Cheng saw himself defeating Yimo and putting his finger to his mouth. He saw himself losing to Zhou Zhengquan. He saw himself defeating strong opponents to win the provincial youth tournament. He saw himself when he first met Pang Leyun. He saw himself when he tied with Ren Li. He saw himself when he finally defeated the Big Devil and lifted the Feitian Cup. He saw himself when he fought against the Inhumans during the King of Four Nations competition. This continued until he defeated the monk of Daxing Temple in the Battle of the Kings. From youth to vigor, from frivolity to maturity, all of his martial arts experiences were shown in Lu Cheng's eyes. It also confused the reporters and the audience. At this time, the video came to an end. Some people appeared alone, some in groups. Some were Yan Shaoling and Little Wonton. Some were men and women he didn't recognize. Their backgrounds were different from each other, and their appearances were unique from all over the world. They appeared separately and shrank into a small frame, side by side. Finally, on the screen, hundreds and thousands of people shouted in unison, shaking the whole arena. Lu Cheng! As the reporters trembled, the opposite stands also burst into a shout. Lu Cheng! Lu Cheng looked over subconsciously. Then he saw Yan Shaoling, Brahmin with 2 ponytails, and many familiar yet strange faces. A huge banner was held up by them, on which the words were clearly written, "You are here, we are here." End of main part. Chapter 584. Early June, Connecticut City. Somewhere in the Holy Top Church. At the front of the church was a towering cross. The seats on both sides extended all the way to the door. Almost all the seats were filled with believers. The dome in the sky was grand and spacious. The walls and windows were narrow and colorful. Rays of sunlight seeped in, bringing a sense of solemnity. A bishop was holding a scripture in his hand. He was preaching slowly in a grand and dignified voice, guiding the lambs closer to the light of heaven. The whole scene was sacred and extraordinary. It made people forget their daily troubles and obtain spiritual sustenance. At this moment, Lu Cheng, wearing a white t-shirt, casual pants, and sneakers, walked in from the door. He put his hands in his pockets and took a few steps forward. He looked around and found an empty seat at the back. He didn't clasp his hands or lower his head like the believers present. Instead, he closed his eyes and leisurely used his ears, spirit, and soul to sense everything around him. Because of the discussions on the internet, he became a hot topic again. He didn't dare to stay long in Xiaofan. A few days later, he flew to Connecticut City. After more than a month of rest, he had recovered most of his strength. The reason he came to the Holy Top Church to observe the ceremony was not because he wanted to convert to God. For a martial artist like him who had a firm will and knew what he wanted and what he was fighting for, faith was faith. He would never rely on an illusory God for the peace of his heart and the path of his future. During this period of time, Lu Cheng had been here to observe and comprehend. According to Geezer Sure, all training methods would lead to the same destination in the end. Lu Cheng felt that the next step of combining martial arts and cultivation, which was also the important step of advancing to physical invulnerability, might be to focus on the word sameness. Because of this, he decided to broaden the scope of his study and not limit it to cultivation and martial arts. Through the church rituals and martial arts sects, he could find the common ground, the meaning of the word sameness, and the essence of improving himself. From there, he could gain a strategic advantage. Lu Cheng closed his eyes and listened carefully. His will was 3 feet above his head. In a state of concentration and detachment, he read the changes in the ritual environment and the spiritual stability of the believers. After a while, the choir began to sing in a neat, holy, and lofty way. With the help of the special design of the chapel, the audience seemed to be immersed in the baptism of the holy light. The hesitation and anxiety in their hearts were swept away. In a short time, they seemed to have been reborn. Lu Cheng slowly opened his eyes and saw that some of the believers were already in tears. He could vaguely see milky white light rippling in the chapel, but it also seemed like an illusion. This feeling. He watched, listened, and experienced thoughtfully. He had some ideas, but he couldn't grasp the essence of it, let alone find any similarities. In a similar atmosphere, the ceremony came to an end. Lu Cheng didn't stay any longer. He stood up, put his hands in his pockets, and walked slowly to the door. A man sitting in the front row of the church happened to put down his hands and looked around as if he had sensed something. He glanced around and saw the back of the person at the door. "Ha!" The golden-haired, blue-eyed youth suddenly cried out in confusion. "What's wrong, Oblak?" The black-haired youth beside him asked in confusion. Oblak frowned and replied, "That person just now looked familiar." However, he couldn't recall who it was because he could only see the back of the person. "There's no one here." The black-haired youth looked back and saw no one by the open door. Forget it. It's nothing important. Oblak shook his head and stood up. I have to go back and prepare for tonight's match. He and the black-haired youth, Charles, came from Europe's Brute Ale, a branch of the mission sect. They were currently escorting the Holy Grail on an exhibition tour in America and sparring with local grandmasters of martial arts. As one of the mission sect's main strongholds on this side of the ocean, Connecticut's activities had been upgraded to a small-scale competition to determine the strongest person below the crown. The mission sect believed that the human body had 10 primordial essences in different positions, corresponding to different symbols. When all of them were condensed, a tree of life would grow and reach the ultimate crown, which was equivalent to the physical invulnerability of China. Although the crown was known as the ultimate, in the context of the church, it was only the ultimate of mortals. When the 3 crowns were worn, one would be able to lift the curtain of shadows and see the god of concealment and become a true archangel. Oblak had made a name for himself at a young age and was brimming with talent. Due to the setback and provocation in China, he had given up on his arrogance and impetuousness. As a result, he had condensed all 10 primordial essences faster than expected. He was only half a step away from growing the tree of life and 1 step away from attaining the crown. In this competition, he had been victorious and was about to enter the finals. Late at night, in a villa. In the center of the living room on the first floor, there was an altar with strange symbols drawn on it. On the surrounding chairs, sofas, dining tables, and even the carpet, there were naked men and women in the midst of intense intercourse. Some were one-on-one, some were one-on-many, and some were even one-on-many. Their expressions were intoxicated and full of joy, as if they had obtained the ultimate release. At the railing on the second floor, Lu Cheng stood quietly with a paper cup in his hand. There was fruit juice in the cup. His desire rose as he watched. His mouth was dry as he drank the cold drink. He tried his best to restrain his thoughts as he sketched out the confrontation formula stroke by stroke, clearing his mind and body. Seizing this opportunity, he activated his kung fu and froze water into ice, turning the lake into a mirror, and making a deity appear 3 feet above his head. Looking at the scene below, Lu Cheng had already shed his lust and impulsiveness. His eyes were dark and deep again as he observed calmly from the side with an aloof attitude. This bunch of spirit cultivators sure know how to play. He chuckled to himself. This was a spirit cultivator sect that had developed properly. In other words, they obtained members through their own preaching. They didn't need to use drugs, bewitchment, or abduction to trick innocent men and women into joining them. Therefore, he had no intention of being chivalrous. Moans entered his ears as the sea of flesh churned. Lu Cheng gently swirled the paper cup in his hand as he observed quietly and harmlessly. He gradually gained some understanding of such a scene and such cultivation. To put it simply, this is a method to break the fixed pattern. He nodded slightly and sipped his fruit juice. Since birth, everyone is bound by various rules and requirements. Once these are broken, one's body and mind will be liberated, relaxed, happy, and stimulated. Combined with one's lust, it's equivalent to the Buddhist tantric enlightenment of lust and emptiness. It doesn't seek lust, but to break one's obsession, break one's shackles, and break the original pattern of one's body and mind. In the process, if you indulge in lust, indulge in such indulgence, and indulge in the feeling of emptiness and relief after the matter is over, you will be on the wrong path. You will jump from one fixed pattern to another, forming new obsessions and new restraints. The spirit cultivator's method of seeking self-spirit is similar to that of Tantric Buddhism. Both are extreme and easy to fall into the devil's path. This is a ritual to enhance one's self-spirit. For a spirit cultivator to enter the physical invulnerability stage, one's self-spirit is closely related to one's self-spirit. What is the similarity between it and the church, the sects that focus on combat, cultivation, and martial arts? Lu Cheng, who had recently read many classics, pondered seriously. After a long time, he took the paper cup and silently disappeared from the second floor. When the ritual was over, the host spirit cultivator returned to the second floor. He planned to seize the opportunity to see his self-spirit and raise it while his body and mind were in a relaxed and liberated state. At this moment, he looked at the study in confusion. The window was wide open, and the night wind blew in, filling the empty space. I forgot to close the window? The spirit cultivator was confused. A car sped through the empty streets at night. Smith looked ahead and asked, puzzled, Lu, why would you want to watch a devil's ritual? Lu Cheng pressed his lips with his right hand and casually made up a story. Devils have their own logic. Only by understanding them can we defeat them. You've become more and more mysterious recently. Smith shook his head and sighed. He was a Puritan passed down from his ancestors, and hated the activities of spirit cultivators. Without further ado, Smith asked, there are 2 more places. Where to first? Lu Cheng thought for a moment and laughed self-deprecatingly. Let's call it a night. Send me back. What a strange guy. Smith criticized silently. He turned the steering wheel and turned into the road to the North District. The next morning, Lu Cheng finished his training. Wiping his sweat, he walked back to the house and happened to see Yan Zheka coming down from the 2nd floor with light steps. Ku, have you felt any obvious nourishment in your body recently? He beat her to it and asked the question that he would ask every 3 to 5 days. Yan Zheka was wearing a t-shirt that exposed her delicate collarbone. She rolled her eyes and said, It's fine. Ever since I collected the 9 words formula, my spirit has been improving rapidly. The effect of nourishing my body is also getting better. As she spoke, she walked down the stairs and said with her dimples, I feel like it won't be long before I can nourish my body, understand, withdraw, achieve Dan equilibrium, and strengthen your foundation of blending cultivation and martial arts. Isn't that awesome? As expected of Coach Yen. Lu Cheng gave her a thumbs up and praised her with a bright smile. When he first completed the cultivation and collected the 9 words formula, he purely wanted to help Ka make up for her congenital deficiency. Who would have thought that it would actually help him open up his own path? If he wanted to rely on George and the others to achieve Dan equilibrium, who knows how long it would take? And the effect of practicing the 9 words formula was also very good. His spirit had improved a lot. Recently, he even felt like a charlatan. Yan Zheka pursed her lips and said proudly, But the improved spirit has been used to nourish my body. My current state is about the same as last year. I can't stay up too late. At this point, she covered her mouth with her hand and yawned cutely. Then, her face turned red and her expression turned fierce. She lifted her leg and kicked Lu Cheng's shin. Although it was quick and swift, she didn't use much strength. Therefore, Lu Cheng could only smile in response. After breakfast, he sent his wife to Connecticut University. After leaving Aunt Du to protect her, Lu Cheng went to the martial arts club and then to the Holy Top Church to continue his observation and comprehension. Chapter 585. Holy Top Church. In a small worship room. There was no choir or fancy decorations, only a dozen or so believers praying with their eyes closed. Lu Cheng didn't say a word after he entered. He found a random corner and sat down, seriously experiencing the different sensations in the air. Tranquility, quietness, calmness, and relaxation drifted over, making him feel as though he was using the confrontation formula. Not a single clergyman or grandmaster of martial arts of the church. The church and the spirit cultivators place great emphasis on the creation and influence of the atmosphere. Lu Cheng sized up the room leisurely and had an idea. He didn't want to disturb them, so he got up quietly and walked out of the room. He glanced at his phone that was on silent mode. Seeing that there was still some time before Yan Zheka's class ended, he decided to take the opportunity to visit the Holy Grail exhibition in the church museum next door, which had recently become popular in Connecticut. It was said that this was a silver cup that once contained the blood of the Savior. According to his master, the original forms of the famous deities and gods in history were often mighty ones of physical invulnerability. There were even some who had stepped into the forbidden zone. I wonder what level the Savior belonged to? Cuckoo was very interested in this matter as well. She planned to visit on the weekend, partly to broaden her horizons and partly for a date. I'll just take it as an opportunity to get a feel for it. Lu Cheng put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked casually to the entrance of the church museum. As soon as he entered, he was stopped by a pretty blonde lady with a clean temperament. She smiled gently and said, "Hello, my name is Tracy." "Hello, my name is Trish. I'm a volunteer guide here. What can I do for you?" A volunteer for the church. Lu Cheng had been here many times recently and was no stranger to this. He waved his hand and smiled. It's fine. I'm just looking around. Volunteers like this are all people who inculcate words like God, salvation, and beauty. I can understand their thoughts and feelings, but I'm sorry, I really don't like it. Compared to this, I'd rather listen to Little Ming's crosstalk. The objects on display here are all related to the history of the church. It's hard to understand their true charm just by looking at them. The blonde lady, Tracy, didn't seem disappointed at being rejected. Her smile remained unchanged as she emphasized. That works too. Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds and changed his mind. This wasn't because the other party was a beautiful girl, but because he thought of a problem. After listening to her explanation, he had a plan in mind and memorized the key points. When he went on a date with his little fairy later, he would be able to show off his knowledgeable side. Wasn't this the meaning of scouting? All right, sir, please. It's best if you look from Exhibition Hall number 1. This is the history of the spread of the Lord's Gospel, and also the history of the development of our church. Trish pointed to the far left and smiled sweetly. Lu Cheng was indifferent. He followed the volunteer guide and casually stepped into Exhibition Area number 1. There were bulletproof glass display windows on both sides, inside which were various antique objects. These are the notes left behind by Saint Simon. Before the scroll of the Dead Sea was unearthed, it was the earliest document that recorded the Gospel. Trish pointed at the mottled papyrus and said. Lu Cheng nodded with great interest, earnestly memorizing the contents of the explanation. After taking a few steps and looking around, Trish's expression suddenly turned solemn. Her voice was filled with grief. She pointed to a single cabinet in the center of Exhibition Hall number 1 and said, "The Savior shed his blood for mankind. This is the ancient cup that once held the holy blood." Lu Cheng followed her gaze and saw a few security personnel, with restrained auras and shocking vitality standing at the four corners of the cabinet. They didn't move an inch. A domineering, dazzling and superior aura came from nearby and enveloped the area. In the glass display window, there was a silver cup sitting quietly. Its pattern was simple and unadorned, and there were no traces of oxidation on its entire body. The inside of the cup was stained with a faint layer of blood. Even after 2,000 years, it still had traces of moisture. It was fresh and slow, as if it was nurturing something. The Savior's blood. Lu Cheng leaned closer and observed intently. He felt that the atmosphere around him had somehow turned sad and gloomy. The color of blood rippled continuously, as though it was filling the cup, but there was nothing in it. This thing is still somewhat miraculous. Amidst his thoughts, Lu Cheng's heart suddenly stirred. He smelled an oppressive and dangerous scent. Ever since he shattered his Jin Dan and fused a part of it, although he didn't have his greatest reliance, the supernatural abilities he mutated had received the strongest enhancement under his current limits. This included ice and fire, as well as his intuition to foresee danger. This was still a distance away from the legendary realm of cicada senses before the autumn wind blows, but compared to the past, it was no longer a small matter. At this moment, Lu Cheng felt like he was in an environment before a storm. Although he didn't see it with his own eyes, he could acutely sense various signs. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Leave immediately. He made a prompt decision, turned around and left, leaving the dumbfounded blonde Trish behind. Sir, wait a minute. Did I make a mistake in my explanation? Trish chased after him and asked in puzzlement. I just remembered that I have something urgent to do, Lu Cheng replied perfunctorily. After pausing for a moment, he continued, I have a few friends coming over soon. Can you help explain? Can I trouble you to wait in the lounge and not do anything else for the time being? Trish nodded happily. Sure, no problem. Lu Cheng didn't linger. With his hands by his side, he strode back to the door, brushing past the blonde blue-eyed youth who had come to take over his shift. O'Block glanced at him and entered the exhibition hall without much thought. His mind was filled with the finals that night. After a few steps, he suddenly paused and whipped his head around to look at the Chinese man he had just met. Lu Cheng? Lu Cheng. The Chinese heavenly son of China who made him taste the most bitter defeat of his life? Wasn't he heavily injured and half-retired from the professional scene? Why is he here? The one I met at the chapel yesterday and found familiar is him too. In the midst of his thoughts, O'Block forgot his duty, and instinctively turned around to chase after the figure that was about to disappear from his sight. His footsteps were accompanied by the faint sound of metal clashing against metal. After returning to Brutale from Xiaofan, he had been paying attention to Chinese martial arts news. He finally found out who had defeated him and that he was a heavenly son of China who had received a lot of attention. That was why he walked out of his self-denial and had a goal. After a few years of hard work, he felt that he had the strength to challenge Lu Cheng again. Who knew that Lu Cheng would meet with an accident and fall from grace? Now that he had met him in Connecticut, he couldn't miss this opportunity. Thump, thump, thump. O'Block weaved through the men and women on the streets with heavy footsteps, quickly closing in on the figure he had been thinking about all this time. However, Lu Cheng's footsteps were just as fast. He couldn't close the distance. Anxious, O'Block's arms, legs, chest, abdomen, and other parts of his body lit up with dazzling stars. They connected together and seemed to be forming a tree-like object. With a burst of dazzling light, he became the true son of Sunday. A terrifying aura enveloped Lu Cheng from a distance. It was both a greeting and a hindrance. But at that moment, he felt the area around the aura become empty. It was like the darkness of the universe that could never be filled. In just an instant, the surging holy light disappeared without a trace. This. O'Block paused in surprise, his eyes filled with astonishment. In that short pause, Lu Cheng had turned into another street and disappeared from his sight. O'Block was about to give chase when he suddenly heard a loud explosion. He felt the ground beneath his feet tremble powerlessly. He turned back and saw the glass windows of the church museum and the Cathedral of Holy Light shatter. Milky white light and crimson flames burst through the dome. Screams and cries rang out one after another. Something's wrong. O'Block threw the matter of Lu Cheng to the back of his mind and sprinted back to the museum. As soon as he entered, he saw half of the glass windows shattered. The floor was littered with injured, moaning lecturers and visitors. It was a mess. As he approached the raging flames, he found his good friends, Johnny and Charles. One of them was lying there with wounds all over his body. He was unconscious and his life was quickly draining away. One of them had his arm blown off. He groaned in pain as he tried to stand up, but he was powerless. O'Block's pupils shrank. He didn't have time to help his companions and ran straight for the Holy Grail. The closer he got, the more tragic the scene became. When he reached the warped independent display case, he saw his teacher, Mason Walker, the leader of the Brute Tar Holy Grail Knights. This middle-aged man with eyes as blue as the ocean was leaning against the display case. His chest was sunken and mostly charred. He was spitting out crimson blood. The silver cup that once held the Savior's blood was nowhere to be seen. Three of the crown level. Mason Walker took a deep breath and let his words flow smoothly. Quick, go to the confession room and find the Archbishop. Tell him to inform the Connecticut government to send out all the crown-level mighty ones and seal off the roads out of the city. With the help of satellite detection and positioning, we need to find the Holy Grail as soon as possible. O'Block nodded vigorously. Without asking any more questions, he turned and ran in the direction of the Holy Top Church. He now understood why the robbery of the Holy Grail happened at this time. Usually, the two crown-level mighty ones from the Brute Tar delegation would take turns guarding the Holy Grail. Together with the Archbishop Kontsev in the church next door, they could hold off the attackers until help arrived. But every day at this time was the Archbishop's fixed confession time. He would cut off his senses and listen wholeheartedly to the teachings of God. When he passed by the museum's lounge, he saw a blonde girl sitting there in a daze from the corner of his eye. She seemed to be in great shock. Lu Cheng didn't care what happened. He ran straight back to the campus of Connecticut University and to Yen Zhuka's classroom. Seeing that everything was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. He took out his phone and browsed the news. Breaking news came in one after another. Museum attacked. Holy Grail stolen. 3 terror-level super criminals. So that's what happened. Lu Cheng finished browsing and refreshed the page again. He saw the latest breaking news. The deliverman suspected to be among the attackers. F***CK. Lu Cheng was stunned at first and then blurted out. P.S. The religions involved in this article are fictional and have nothing to do with reality. I just saw a student talking about the Kabbalah tree and the hidden god in the book review section. In the end, I was swallowed by Qi Dian while I was taking an afternoon nap. Scary. Scary. Let's not talk about such issues. Chapter 586. After seeing the words, "deliver man," Lu Qing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought, the one who cheats others will be cheated sooner or later. Back then, he was still proud of the fact that there were many imitators of the deliverer man and that he had successfully cleared himself of suspicion. But in the end, such a huge scapegoat fell from the sky. Damn it! Luckily, everyone knows about my damaged potential due to my serious injuries. No one will believe that I can suddenly become a terror grade, which is the equivalent of a physical invulnerability mighty one. I won't take the blame. Lu Cheng heaved a long sigh of relief. He turned to seriously pondering the matter. The more he thought about it, the more puzzled he felt. Strange, he muttered, frowning. There were two strange points. First, the greatest value of the Holy Grail was that it was stained with a little of the Savior's blood. It was of great symbolic significance and enlightenment to the various branches of the mission sect. For practitioners of other systems, such as martial artists, it could at most be used as a reference to draw parallels. It was an item that was worth losing. As for the research institutions of major countries, they had no lack of similar items rooted in their own country. There was no need for them to get the Holy Grail. Second, the attacker chose to attack at a relatively busy time in the morning. This was indeed the time when the security system was most likely to be negligent. But it was also not a good time for them. It was too eye-catching and obvious. They couldn't kill people calmly, remove the surveillance, erase the traces, and eliminate the influence. They would definitely leave behind many clues. With so many physical invulnerability mighty ones in Connecticut and many with amazing means, they would be in great danger if they couldn't leave the area immediately. And it wasn't easy to escape from Connecticut immediately. No matter how fast a physical invulnerability mighty one could run, they couldn't outrun the speed of radio transmission. In broad daylight, the Connecticut government wouldn't be slow to respond. As long as they mobilized their so-called terror-grade mighty ones to cooperate with the police and the National Guard to seal off the main entrances and exits, check the strength of the passers-by, one by one, and prevent them from taking advantage of the situation. In addition, with satellites and other high-tech equipment monitoring the farmland, lakes, rivers, and other sparsely populated areas, it would be very difficult for them to leave the country without any means of control. In other words, this was a matter that risked many times more than the benefits. That was why the Brutal delegation dared to have the real Holy Grail on tour in America. Another purpose? Lu Cheng shook his head slightly. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. The Holy Grail had been in Brutal's possession for hundreds of years, but they had not produced any valuable results. Who would be willing to take the risk for an illusory hope? Since he couldn't figure it out, he couldn't be bothered to think about it. In any case, it had nothing to do with him. Lu Cheng lit up the dim screen of his phone and shared the entire story with his little fairy girl, who was still in class. He also informed the military liaison personnel. Incidents involving physical invulnerability experts were worthy of the attention of the country. At this moment, Connecticut had entered the highest state of alert. All departing flights at Orion Airport were postponed, and all departing passengers were rechecked to confirm their strength. On the bridge across the river, police had set up checkpoints to prevent cars from passing by. Below, warships patrolled back and forth, scanning the water with sonar and other devices. On the other side of the river, a white-haired old man with arms thicker than the legs of others was sitting in the back of a nanny van. He was resting with his eyes closed in case of an emergency. He was none other than the Grand Elder of the Jaruga sect, Xiaofan. The sparkling lake swayed. Ships from the naval base spread out, using all kinds of high-tech equipment to complete the blockade. On the deck of their flagship, a brown-haired middle-aged man in a general's uniform crossed his arms and looked coldly in the direction of Connecticut. The ripples around him stopped, sparkling. Satellites outside the atmosphere were closely monitoring the places where the city was connected to the farms, the wilderness, and so on. Once a person appeared, they would immediately report and track him. Other than that, there were other arrangements. Because of the existence of powerful humans, the development of technology had always been in the direction of restricting them. In the church museum with broken windows and a dome that exposed the sky, Archbishop Kontsev, who was obviously of Latin descent, stood in front of a warped display case. He sighed. The Lord often teaches us not to overlook today's misfortune because of yesterday's good fortune. We have been careless because nothing has happened before. Yes. Another crown-level strongman from the Brute Ale delegation, Townsend, drew a cross in front of his chest in sincere repentance. Normally, when the Archbishop was confessing, he should have been with Mason Walker. But after so many days of smooth sailing, everyone felt that everything was normal and that there would be no accidents, so he was lazy. O'Block stood quietly by the side, waiting for the notification from the Connecticut Command Center. At this moment, he felt something and turned his head to look at the entrance of Exhibition Hall No. 1. He saw 3 men in black robes slowly approaching. The leader was tall, with indiscernible wrinkles on his forehead, eyes and cheeks. His hair and eyes were pale white. O'Block glanced at him and felt that he was very close, very noble, and very trustworthy. On the left side of the old man was a man with emerald eyes and an illusory aura. He had a scholarly air about him. He was the light mentor of the spiritualist order, Lucas. Could that be the world-famous grand mentor of the spiritualist order, Cisco? After making eye contact with Kantsev, the old man smiled and said, "I'm here to meet the spirit of this place." There was no ripple in Kantsev's eyes. He humbly drew a cross and said, "May the Lord bless you." "What a vicious curse," said the old man with a smile. "Wherever they go, they leave traces. I believe that the 3 attackers will be caught. This is a challenge to the order of society. This is a challenge to the stability of America and Connecticut. The Holy Grail contains the blood of the Savior. It is closely related to us." Kantsev looked deeply into his eyes and said calmly, "It can be fooled for a while, but it won't be fooled forever. 2 days at most. Cisco, I hope this will help you." The grand mentor of the spiritualist order, Cisco nodded slightly and said no more. He focused on channeling to track down the culprits. In the bedroom on the 2nd floor, Yen Zhaka, who was studying for her final exams, looked up and discussed the Holy Grail incident with Lu Cheng, who was leisurely playing with his phone. At the end of the conversation, she gently thumped the table and sighed. "What a pity. I haven't even seen what the Holy Grail looks like." Due to their beliefs, the Holy Grail couldn't be photographed during the exhibition. They couldn't view it online unless they went to see it live. "It looks very ordinary." Lu Cheng excitedly took a pen and paper and drew for Yen Zhaka. After a few strokes, he handed it to her as if he was presenting a treasure. "That's it." Yen Zhaka glanced at it and immediately pursed her pink lips to prevent herself from laughing out loud. After holding it in for a dozen seconds, she nodded solemnly. "Cheng, your drawing skills. Your calligraphy is better than your drawing." "My calligraphy is bad enough." Lu Cheng shook his head in amusement. "I don't accept such compliments." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a throbbing sensation. He stood up with a thoughtful expression. "What's wrong?" Yen Zhaka blinked her clear eyes. "We have guests," replied Lu Cheng with a smile as he slowly walked to the door. After a few steps, he turned back and said to the girl, "Let's go down together. It's safer to be close to each other in case any accidents happen." Okay. Yen Zhaka nodded obediently and reached out to hold Lu Cheng's left hand. When the couple reached the 1st floor, the girl and Aunt Du sat on the sofa in the living room while Lu Cheng walked to the door and pulled it open. The door creaked open. O'Block, who was about to press the doorbell, froze. "Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with?" Lu Cheng already knew what was going on. Beside O'Block, the white-haired blue-eyed grand teacher looked over with a smile and spoke warmly. "Just a routine investigation." In that instant, Lu Cheng felt an incomparable closeness and respect for the grand teacher. He wanted nothing more than to prostrate himself on the ground and confess his thoughts and repent of his past mistakes. With a change of thought, he outlined the confrontation formula and calmed his body and mind, dispelling the emotions that weren't considered negative. "If only I knew," replied Lu Cheng with a smile. His gaze was calm and his expression was leisurely. To the grand teacher, he was like an ordinary auntie in the neighborhood committee. Completely unaffected. O'Block was taken aback. Cisco asked calmly, "You've been going to the Holy Top Church a lot recently." "Why?" To find ways to calm my mind, answered Lu Cheng truthfully. Lu Cheng answered half truthfully and half jokingly. He then casually explained, you should know that I've suffered a lot of serious setbacks this year. He was indeed looking for ways to break through to the physical invulnerability stage. Once he reached the physical invulnerability stage, his mind would undoubtedly find peace. Yeah, that's right. Lu Cheng wasn't disappointed or pessimistic. When he talked about the terrifying setbacks that had almost forced him out of the professional circle, he spoke as if he was an observer. Not only was O'Block surprised, but even the Grand Teacher's eyes flickered. In this aspect, us spirit practitioners might be more useful than churches, said Cisco casually. So, why did you go to the museum to see the Holy Grail today? Cisco asked casually before asking, why did you go to the museum to see the Holy Grail? Out of curiosity. For reference. I was supposed to go with my girlfriend on the weekend, but I happened to be free in the morning, so I decided to take a look in advance to prepare for our date, said Lu Cheng frankly. The Grand Teacher paused for a few seconds. His eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, you left suddenly before the attack. Did you know something beforehand? Lu Cheng smiled with a heart as cold as ice. According to my data, I have 3 superpowers. One of them is the ability to foresee danger. Because I didn't know what kind of danger it was, I could only leave first and warn you later. This may seem selfish, but I don't think it's a crime, right? Cisco nodded slowly and asked for confirmation. In other words, before the crown-level Mason Walker discovered the danger, you already predicted it? O'Block subconsciously held his breath as soon as the words left his mouth. Lu Cheng nodded calmly. You could say that. P.S. Hey, I'll update in advance for you guys today. Looking for monthly votes. Chapter 587. You can say that? As the disciple of the crown-level Mighty One, Mason Walker, O'Block felt humiliated by Lu Cheng's reply. However, when he looked up, he saw that Lu Cheng was neither arrogant nor boastful. Lu Cheng was describing the menu calmly, as though he was describing what was on the menu tonight. This wasn't boasting or bragging. It was the truth. O'Block took a deep breath and told himself that blacksmiths were good at forging, tailors were good at making clothes, and everyone had their own unique strengths. A king wasn't better than a commoner in every aspect. After quietly listening to Lu Cheng's reply, Grand Teacher Cisco smiled. I understand. After that, he nodded and left the door at an unhurried pace. O'Block was in charge of the aftermath. With a solemn expression, he said to Lu Cheng, that's all for questioning. Thank you for your cooperation. If necessary, we will visit again. Since the Grand Teacher didn't say anything, it meant that Lu Cheng wasn't lying. Okay. Lu Cheng nodded casually. O'Block stared at him deeply. Without another word, he turned around and chased after Cisco. Originally, he wanted to take this opportunity to bring up the matter of a challenge. However, the first reason was that the Holy Grail had been stolen, which was a serious matter. As a member of the Order of Knights, he couldn't just think about his personal matters and ignore the bigger picture. The second reason was that he suddenly felt uncertain in his heart, as if he had lost his confidence. That was why he didn't say anything even though he wanted to. Although Lu Cheng isn't at the crown level, he's still at the same level as me. However, he's a level higher than me. He has a sense of transcendence. O'Block's face darkened as he entered the car. After watching them leave, Lu Cheng closed the door and returned to the living room. Yen Zheka stood up and leaned over. She mimicked Lu Cheng's tone and said, you can say that. Cheng, you're really awesome. Why do I feel like you're mocking me? Lu Cheng looked at Ku, amused. That guy just now was O'Block, the one who came to Xiaofan before. I saw in his eyes that he wasn't convinced and wanted to fight me again. I had no choice but to put on a show to scare him away. Otherwise, with only 70 to 80% of my strength, I might not be his match. Skill. Bluff. Yen Zheka rolled her eyes. You still remember who he is? Of course. Those were the days when we traveled freely. I'll never forget it. Lu Cheng laughed. The moment I saw the Brutale delegation, I remembered him. I was chased around the streets by him this morning. Yen Zheka pursed her lips and turned her head. She smiled and said, I remember him too. At this time, Aunt Du returned to her own room and left the place to the young couple. Yen Zheka looked around. She looked at Lu Cheng. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. I'll go check what's in the fridge and freezer. Lu Cheng lowered his head and smiled. As he walked towards the kitchen, he thought, there are still some dumplings and noodles left from yesterday. Should I make dumpling noodles? What are you doing here? Lu Cheng took off his apron and put it on. You're making supper for your wife. I'm going to make supper for my darling. Yen Zheka chuckled. You're such a glutton. You want to steal my food every time. Well, I think my egg fried rice is as good as yours. How about a bowl of egg fried rice? A big bowl. Lu Cheng answered with a big smile in his eyes. Just like that, the couple kept each other busy. They exchanged a few words from time to time. Cheng, are you going back to Songqing soon? Yen Zheka asked as she cracked the eggs. Yes, I have to go back and get the certificate. I even skipped the oral examination, so I can't skip this. Besides, there's another thing that needs to be settled, you know. Lu Cheng looked at the pot of boiling water and added fuel to the fire. Then I'll go and meet Dirty Tong and the others. Yen Zheka said happily. She paused for a few seconds and bit her lower lip. Then she said with melancholy, I'm going to start learning from my tutor next semester. I'll be busy. You're going to enter the professional circle again. You'll be busy too. Why don't we go on a trip this summer? We can ask for the Lovelock, the pyramids, and the grassland. What do you think? Although Lu Cheng was a little confused by his wife's sudden change of topic, he quickly recovered. He poured the dumplings into the pot and said, Okay, we'll come up with a strategy later. Okay, let's go to Songqing first and then back to Xiaofan. We'll stay at home until August so that my dad won't be angry. Yen Zheka thought about the plan while frying the eggs. In the end she said, Cheng, I've recently found an animal that I like. What animal? Bro Flat Top. What's that? Honey badger, white hair and silver cape. Its motto is, if you're not in a fight, you're on your way to a fight. Oh, and don't tell me who the enemy is. Tell me how many there are. Tell me the time and place. Sounds interesting. Yeah, and, hey Ku, it's time for your egg fried rice. I can faintly smell something burning. Ouch! After a while, a voice sounded in the restaurant again. Cheng, who are you talking to on WeChat? Smith and me. Spider, what did he say? He asked me why my alert level suddenly changed back to dangerous. He said he's going to monitor me 24/7 again. You kept laughing just now. What did you say? I said because I bragged in front of the great teacher. What did he say? He said F***K. Haha, who on earth did he learn Chinese from? In the collection room of a luxurious villa, a deep voice was speaking in an excited and intoxicated tone. There are billions of people in the world, and I'm the only one who has evolved such an ability. By absorbing the blood of others, I obtain the corresponding ability. It's the ability of God. This was a thin man wearing a black tuxedo and a dark red cape. His facial features were deep, and his eyes were red. In his hand was an ancient silver cup that seemed to be filled with blood, but it was also empty. Yes, it's so special that they never thought that the people you killed had their eyes cut out from their foreheads. It wasn't a cult ritual, but just a disguise. Your real goal is their blood. It's their special trait. Isn't that right, Nightmare? Opposite the man in the dark red cape was a brown-eyed man drinking champagne. He was in his 30s or 40s and dressed meticulously. The handkerchief in front of his chest pocket was folded into a flower. Yes, thank you for your help, God Slayer. The man in the dark red cape laughed out loud. When I extract the blood of the Savior, absorb it, and digest it, I'll truly enter the terror grade. In the future, I'll replace that old guy from the Samano royal family and become the emperor of the sanguine race. Having said that, he looked to the other side. There stood a man with dark skin and a beard who had features that were very characteristic of the Dead Sea. The man in the dark red cape pressed his right hand to his chest and bowed elegantly. Thank you. Thank you for letting me show the strength of the terror grade at the last minute, confusing many people. Pharaoh thinks highly of you, the bearded man said with a serious expression. the bearded man said with a serious expression. In 2 months, he has a big operation and needs your help. No problem, as long as my absorption goes smoothly. The man in the dark red cape smiled and watched as the bearded man walked to the ancient coffin in the corner. He took off his clothes, wrapped himself in a bandage, and lay inside. He lost all signs of life, turning into a real old mummy. Look, there's no attacker here. There's only the collection of mummies bought by the collector, Mr. Constantine. The man in the dark red cape smiled smugly. He asked the brown-eyed man, God Slayer, why did you agree to cooperate? The God Slayer touched his nose with his index finger and said, Maybe, it's more interesting to have one more terror baddie in this world. At this moment, the sound of knocking came from the surveillance system. The man in the dark red cape glanced and said, It's Lucas. After that, he opened the door of the collection room and returned to the living room to let the black-robed, green-eyed spirit cultivator, Lucas, enter. What did the great teacher ask you to do? The man in the dark red cape asked. Lucas looked at him calmly and said, Constantine, the great teacher asked me to tell you that in 2 days, at most 2 days, more than 10 Terra grade masters, a few special forces equipped with man-made weapons and various high-tech equipment, and more special agents who are good at tracking will arrive in Connecticut. The uniqueness of the Holy Grail can't be hidden for long. You have to complete the absorption before this deadline and try not to damage the Holy Grail too much. When the time comes, as long as you return it secretly, the security level will be lowered. If this situation continues, no one can take it. Don't think that you can avoid the road. There are eyes watching from the sky. The more deserted a place is, the more obvious it is. The man in the dark red cape, Constantine, was silent for a moment. He raised the Holy Grail and smiled. Okay. A few days later, Lu Cheng keenly sensed from the news that the security level in Connecticut had been lowered. Hence, he sent a message to Smith. The Holy Grail has been found? The 3 Terror grade attackers have been caught? After a while, Smith replied, Apparently, the Holy Grail has been found. It's in a trash can. It's a little damaged. We've only confirmed the identity of the assailant, but we haven't found out who it is. Among the assailants are the Godslayer and the Nightmare. In short, this matter has come to an end. Come to an end? Come to an end just like that? Lu Cheng was surprised. Such a serious matter had come to an end just like that? Or was there something brewing under the surface? Before he could ask further, Smith sent a message. Lu, I want to ask you something. Go ahead, Lu Cheng answered generously. Smith was puzzled. I've been practicing according to the awakening and improvement of superpowers but haven't made any progress for more than a year. I'm getting further and further away from the dangerous grade. Lu, do you have any good suggestions? I find you more and more mysterious and hard to guess. Find a few exotic spiders to bite you? Lu Cheng joked. That's not funny at all. Smith replied. Lu Cheng pondered for a moment and said, Actually, the improvement of superpowers is related to the strengthening of your self. The better control of your body, the easier it is to go deeper. I suggest you awaken your self-spirit. I'm from the mission. Smith emphasized helplessly. Why does Lu feel so unreliable? Haha, an ascetic from one of the branches of the mission sect can be used as a reference. Lu Cheng stopped teasing. After putting down his phone, he looked out of the window and thought leisurely. The matter of the Holy Grail has come to an end. Ku will be taking her final exams next. After that, she will return to Songqing and meet up with her master to look for the secret residence of the Longhu Immortal at the bottom of Weishui Lake. P.S. Damn it, Qidian's back end is drawing. I could have brought it forward. Begging for votes. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.